All right. Okay, give it to Lyle.
Oh, how you doing? All right.
All right. All right. I'd like to call our June 20th, 2019 City Council meeting to order, and our opening will be provided by Councilmember DeCare.
Actually, our opening is going to be provided by Boy Scout Troop 407. Heber Davis and a couple of other scouts played rock, paper, scissors to see who was going to do our opening prayer. Heber Davis, second-class scout, if you want to come to the lectern and give our opening prayer. Thank you.
Our dear Heavenly Father, and for the first day, and please bless that we can have a nice day, and thank you for this weather, and please bless that the council members can make good decisions, and in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Heber. If we can stand and for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Boy Scout Troop 407.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We always enjoy having our scouts here and appreciate when they're able to take part in the meeting. The first item on our agenda is a presentation from UTA trustee Beth Holbrook. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Mayor and Council. It's great to be here this evening. I'm Beth Holbrook with Utah Transit Authority, and thank you. And I am the trustee in this area, so I represent Davis, Weaver, and Box Elder counties. And I'm here tonight to kind of talk about a couple of things, your current service levels and what we're contemplating in the future. And as always, you are welcome to ask any questions that you would like. So one of the things that I just kind of wanted to bring to everyone's attention, and of course I can get you this data should you need it. These are current buses that go through Kaysville. And as you know, immediately north to you, Layton City has a FrontRunner station as well. And as you can see the bus numbers, they have a couple of stops throughout your city, and any questions you have or any routes or any questions regarding transportation and transit, you just feel free to ask me. Ooh, it's like, I'm like, it has a mind of its own. These are the actual route numbers and the average ridership per daily. As you can see, the 470 is the largest by far in terms of the number of average weekday riders at 3,200. And the time of day that it runs is rush hours and what we call off-peak, which is obviously non-transportation time. Starts at 4 a.m., ends at 12 a.m. on weekdays, 11:30 on Saturday, and 9 p.m. on Sunday. That's our most popular route throughout Davis County, and it actually does traverse the entire county and head to Salt Lake as its final destination. The other bus routes can be, let's see, the 456 is only peak hour because it's just designed to get extra traffic that's heading in the direction of Salt Lake City, or Salt Lake County, I should say. One of the things that I also wanted to talk about, this is just another view, and that includes the Layton stuff, simply to show the routes going through there, as well as the FrontRunner shop at the bottom. That's just kind of talking about the same type of thing. One of the things I wanted to talk about this evening is we have done a study for the last 5 months, and we call it the Service Choices. And basically, Service Choices is designed to ask the public, which we did at the end of May. We closed that survey. But what we've been trying to do is establish our bus service to make it more interactive and more helpful for people that are riding our services and determining where they want to go, whether they're going through Davis County or their destination is within Davis County. And what this will do is it will basically, we're going to draft up a plan from this data in the fall of this year, and then we're going to, when we redraft it, then we're going to hand it out to various communities throughout our service area, and then do any refinements that we need to and implement it fully in our August 2020 bus service change. So just for your information, we have bus service changes, only one per year for everything, which is the month of August, and that usually dovetails with school changes, so universities and state, and Weber State is, I think, the closest one in here in this area. And we also do ski bus service, which is December we do ski bus service until the end of March. So those are the three change times that we have on that. The question that we're basically asking is, what do you guys see as the balance between ridership and coverage? So ridership is basically the, let me see if I have that. No, I don't have it. Ridership is basically, you take your major transit corridors, whether it is Main Street or anything else, and you just focus on that. Coverage means maybe Mrs. Jones, a little off of Main Street, needs to have access. Which one do you provide service for? If you just do your high denser areas, then you have a lot of frequency and you have a lot of service times. But you don't get a lot of coverage into your other areas. And so we're really trying to make that balance more complete in Davis County. I also wanted to talk about the future of FrontRunner. Sorry, I'm kind of like talking fast because I know you guys have a busy agenda, so apologies on that. And again, ask me any questions as they come up. One of the things we're talking about with FrontRunner is some of the service that we have right now on our peak times, which is our commute times, is actually full in FrontRunner. And what we're looking to do is determine what the best option is, whether it's a low, medium, or high investment scenario that can accomplish some of the things that we want to do with our service moving forward. As we all know, growth in our communities is anticipated to rise substantially within the next 40 plus years. And a lot of that growth is going to occur on the Wasatch Front. And that growth, although it is different, I remember the time when you used to just commute and you go down to Salt Lake, and that was a major destination with the exception of Hill Air Force Base. Now it's not like that. We have a lot of economic centers. Hill Air Force Base is one of them here in this area, Salt Lake City, but there are other areas as well. We're heading north to Ogden. We're heading down to Sandy. We're heading down to Lehigh. Silicon Slopes is a major draw. And one of the things we want to do is we want to make our system even more fine-tuned and contemplate air quality improvements along our routes as well as we can. The challenge right now for us is that we have 90 miles of track between Ogden and Provo. The majority of that track is single track, which means that our trains have to pull over, they basically stop at stations, and change directions. So one train can pass the other train, and then they move forward to their next destinations, north and south. In an ideal world, that would be more efficient if we had double tracking the whole entire route, because then we don't have to wait for a station in order to change positions on trains, and we can run it more efficiently. And then we have air quality issues as well that we want to hopefully anticipate addressing. And one of those would be to consider electrification, if that is an option down the road. Right now, we're doing an overhaul on all of our locomotives. We anticipate doing 2 a year, and what that is going to do right now is it's going to take it to Tier 2 plus as a diesel engine, and we hope to get that completely accomplished by 2024. And in order to balance out our system, we hope to be able to include that or to incorporate that along electrified routes and then slowly transfer those out as they age out of the system. This is our current travel times. We do 30-minute service for FrontRunner on our peak time, so mornings and afternoons. And the rest of that is hour service with no service on Sundays. That's our biggest question. Why do we not have service on Sundays? And the answer is that a Federal Transit Administration requirement is that we inspect our track. And so we do that on a weekly basis. We have 90 miles, and so we have a lot to do on Sundays. So we are working 24/7 on that. What we hope to do if we electrify is get to 15 minutes. With an electrified system, the trains pick up speed and reduce speed much quicker and more efficiently. You don't have that major drag that you would have with a diesel engine. 15 minutes would basically transform our system in the sense that people would rarely be going, oh, dang it, I need to catch that. I need to catch that. Now they would just get on the system. We would also, of course, add capacity. One of the things that you will hear the Department of Transportation here, UDOT, will say this also, and that is they can't build enough freeways to fully get and address capacity needs for our future growth. One of the reasons for that, one of the critical reasons, is because if you are, right now, if you look at, say, some areas in our system, you have 3 lanes each way plus an HOV lane on both sides. That's 8 lanes total. And if you were to go any more lanes out, now you're taking out either housing, commercial, industrial, whatever that particular area is. And now you are looking at economic challenges in addition to doing that. So we have to be judicious when we look at our system moving forward. The thing that is most critical is that when we look at transit, we recognize that not everyone rides our system, but everyone who does ride our system benefits the entire community. And you might ask how that works, and quite simply, that means a person riding transit is taking a approximately 10-foot vehicle off of the freeway. As you know, and as I drove up here this evening, one of the challenges is that there is currently a bit of a bottleneck right here in terms of freeway access during peak hours. And every person on the train can eliminate at least 10 feet worth of freeway. And this, I should talk about this a little bit in the sense that this is actually a UDOT survey or study that they did this, and they talked about the fact of adding freeway lanes and what the growth would represent and what the maximum capacity would be. As you can see right now, if you look right at the very far left where it says the future PTC baseline. So PTC is basically positive train control, which means that that's the system that's federally mandated to make sure that trains slow down during crossings. And that is the number of people that it carries with a low investment, a medium investment, and a high investment, and other stations as well in the future. If you build a freeway lane right now, the theory is that you would average 2,000 cars per hour during peak times. Anything more than that, and that's considered either inefficient in either you have too much capacity or you have too much surface available. Oh, here I am pointing to this. This is our rideuta.com/service choices is basically for you to give us your input into anything that you would like to see considered for any of our services moving forward. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
I would like you to tell us about do you have autonomous vehicle trial going on?
Yes.
Tell us about that, please.
Oh, perfect. Mm-hmm. So we partnered with UDOT, and we purchased 2 autonomous vehicles. And they are they have about 10 to 12 person capacity, and they are completely operator-less. And it is designed, so we're doing our testing actually until July 6th over at the Farmington Station area. And it's basically a really sensitive vehicle that has a lot of sensors around it, and it's designed to go slowly and pick people up and get them to other parts of a destination. And so again, no driver, but we do have people on there just to help people acclimate. Kind of like a greeter, if you will. Maybe not like a Walmart greeter, but something like that. Mm-hmm. And just trying to help them to get acclimated to the fact there is no driver. So it's a free service to anybody who's on there. And right now, it's free to ride it. We just want people to get acclimated. There's only a handful of states that have been able to get the federal approvals to run on streets. And we were one of them, so we're excited about it. Great question.
Yeah, and then one last thing.
Yes.
you and I have been talking about perhaps getting one of the shuttle buses to do our stroll Kaysville
Yes.
and our farmers market and connecting them up. And so just so people know, we're working on that so that we could have folks do both stroll Kaysville and the farmers market. So
Yes.
we're going to work on that.
We want to try and see if we can integrate your community to community events. A lot of times, transit has this unique opportunity to kind of, obviously we move people from one place to another. Some of our challenges are we obviously don't go door to door, we're not Uber, but we want to make sure that we address that first and last mile. And part of what we're talking about is getting people acclimated to using our services, using a bus, using a AV shuttle when it becomes totally, without the trial period type of thing, and getting accustomed to using our FrontRunner, our any other service that we have. One of the things that I think is really great, and I challenge everyone, is to try one thing in our transit system, whether it's a bus, whether it's FrontRunner, whether you decide you want to go hang out at Temple Square and you take tracks as well. We would love for you to try it. We want you to be kind of like our ambassadors, because what we're doing really is setting an example for people in the future, for our children and everyone else, that transit is going to be an intrinsic part of helping us to deal with growth so that we don't sit on our freeways for too long. So thank
great.
you. That was
Any
great questions.
questions from council?
No.
I have one question.
Yes, Councilmember Barber.
Your question when you were asking for feedback, it was about, was it coverage versus availability of bus stops throughout the city?
It's not availability, but that's a great question because that's a good distinction. We do obviously have to keep to what we have available in terms of our revenue that we receive from the cities. And so we can't overspend. But that being said, I will use an example that I was at West Point City just about 2 months ago. And one of the things that I think is really unique, is certainly for cities that are having more growth and experiencing growth in different ways, is that they were telling me while I was doing this presentation, hey, I have an apartment building going up here, which is not a big deal for everyone, but for West Point, that's a big deal. That's a game changer. And they were like, if we could get a stop here instead of, halfway down the street, which is not a huge thing, but yet it's a big thing, right? So it's a great question, and that's what we want, because I don't necessarily know certainly what you guys are doing as a community, but if I know that there's going to be some type of a growth issue, whether it's a density building, whether it's a commercial building, whatever that is, that's always helpful, because then we can help to integrate our service more efficiently. Like I said, we change our service one time a year, which is August. And so anything that we're doing right now is going to be, we're fine-tuning our August change. It's going to be coming up in 2 months. So we're not going to really change anything significantly this year. But for next year, for next August, be thinking about that. And is there anything we can refine?
Excellent. So
Thank you.
Just be in communication with you. It wasn't part of the survey you had online, just talk to you.
Yes,
We have some
yes.
ideas.
You're right, it's not technically part of the survey, but
Okay.
it's one of the interesting things that we have found out from people, which I think is beneficial. So, excellent question. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Garn.
So is UTA using Governor Herbert's success framework, the theory of constraints, and how has that changed the thinking about, because you mentioned we only have a limited budget. How do you get out to the underserved areas and yet provide enough resources to the high density areas? So do you know if theory of constraints has been helpful or implemented at UTA at all?
So as I'm understanding you, the theory of constraints is more, it's obviously a budgetary restraint in terms of how we're going to do that. And for the most part, it's effective in the way that we have to make sure that we stay within what it is that we need to do to run and manage our system. Part of that management includes what we call MOW, which is our maintenance of way. In other words, we just have to make sure that everything is running smoothly. I don't know if anyone went downtown last month in May, but we had to shut down 4 South to redo some of our curved tracks lines. And I know it was kind of a challenge. I'm so sorry. But what we found is that there was a lot more wear and tear on the curves, and of course it was very loud if you were a business that was by there. And So with that in mind, we partnered with UDOT to have them help us with the closing of the street, and we tried to be as constrained as we could in terms of our budgeting. So we were very judicious in what we did. We obviously have safety to address, but we only have a fixed budget in terms of maintenance of way. And so we're very, very careful, even in challenging times. And it's challenging because there's so many other projects that construction can be a bit of a challenge right now. But we actually came in one day ahead of schedule, so.
So
And
you
maybe I'm
mentioned,
not understanding
of course,
your
it's
question.
not just budget, it's also flow. So theory of constraints is always, you have a certain flow, and that seems to fit transportation perfectly. So, because the idea of bottlenecks or manufacturing, that there's bottlenecks in the system that slow you down. So you mentioned one, like the 15 minutes for electrification instead of a 30-minute window.
Right.
So now you've just increased your flow. You've got a little bit of capital investment there at first in the, getting the electric engines, but once you put that in place, you can do, then your budget analysis. Okay, how much did it cost, but how much more efficient is it making the system? Or the dual tracks, things like that.
Yep.
What's the investment versus the efficiency gains? And so that's kind of theory of constraints, but it sounds like you're already, looking at those things. How do we remove the chief bottlenecks, concentrate on those first, so that we make our resources stretch further?
That is an excellent point, and I thank you for further delineating that, because you're right. We do look at things from constraint, but we always have to look at our funding to kind of flow with that, if you will.
Right.
And one of the things about looking at our system moving forward is with electrification, it does allow us to simply add trains during peak as well as service times of 15 minutes. And that's something that you can't do on I-15 no matter how hard you try. So excellent,
you.
great question.
All right, thank you. Thank
How
you.
do we rent the AV vehicle to run our kids around?
Councilmember
Is that their way to process to get into that?
There is unfortunately no opportunity to rent our AV vehicle, but it is an excellent thought. But thank you. And thank you again for the time that you've allowed me. I as your trustee representative, fluidity in our titles there, I really feel strongly that if I am not making enough connection with you, I'm not getting your feedback. And that's what I want most of all. And of course that goes for residents as well. We would like to hear, even if it's something that is not going well, it's better that we know about it because we can address it. And so with that said, please reach out anytime that you have any questions at all.
Well, Commissioner Trustee Holbrook, thank you so much. And I am really impressed with everything that you have been able to accomplish in just a short amount of time. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very
All
much.
right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. We are now going to have some training from our city attorney, Nick Mills.
So tonight we're going to take a couple minutes and talk about Open and Public Meetings Act. This is required annual training by the state. That's required by the code, actually. So if you recall, last year we talked about open and public meetings. We talked about the policy statement in the law that said that the public body should always conduct, or should have a strong preference to conduct their business openly and deliberate openly. We talked about what defined a meeting, how to convene a meeting, and then we finished with a brief discussion of how, although there's an Open Public Meetings Act, that didn't prohibit you from emailing each other. There's a specific provision in the code that says that you can send electronic messages to each other. You just that shouldn't devolve into deliberation on topics. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about closed meetings. Closed meetings are the big exception here, and it's a very limited exception, but it's I guess, frequently used, I think. In order to have a closed meeting, you have to have a quorum present. You have to have an open meeting, properly noticed. And so that even if you're only going to discuss that one item that's a closed meeting, the meeting has to start open and it has to end open as an open meeting. 2/3 of the members of the governing body have to approve closing the meeting. And when the meeting's closed, you can only discuss the approved topics that the legislature has allowed. Before you close a meeting, you need to have in your minutes that the reason that you're closing the meeting, the location, and the record by name of who voted to close the meeting. This doesn't mean that the mayor needs to announce that we're going to have a closed meeting for this purpose. The agenda can suffice for that, but the record of the vote should be in the minutes. There's many reasons to close a meeting, and many things you could do during a closed meeting, but for municipalities, there's only a few. The first is, I think, what I would refer to as the appointed/department head exception, and that means that if you're going to hire somebody, obviously if you're going to hire a city manager, in some municipalities the city attorney is an appointed position, you can close the meeting to discuss the applicants and who should be, their pros and cons. This is obviously, I think, a time when you see that the privacy interests that people have and the need for government to conduct business efficiently trumps the openness. Could be very damaging to an applicant's professional career to have some of these things discussed in an open meeting. And I think the law recognizes that. The other reason you can close a meeting as a municipality is for strategy sessions to discuss collective bargaining, which we don't deal with here in Kaysville, but other municipalities do, to discuss imminent or pending litigation. Obviously, if you have a lawsuit going on, you have a strong interest in hearing candid and honest evaluation of how that lawsuit's going to go and potential outcomes. That might not be very beneficial, though, if you had to air that in an open meeting and your attorney had to explain all the warts on your case. And then the third one is that involves municipalities is matters involving the purchase or sale of property for a similar reason. You don't want to start discussing selling a piece of property and then the market changes because people in the community know that the city needs to sell the property or is interested in selling the property. There are a couple things that you cannot do during a closed meeting. You cannot approve an ordinance, a resolution, a rule, a regulation, or an appointment at a closed meeting. So you can discuss the applicants, you can decide, come to a consensus on who should be appointed, but that official appointment can't happen during a closed meeting. And then you cannot interview or discuss people that are attempting to fill a vacancy for an elected position. So when Stroh was appointed to the City Council, that could not have been done in a closed meeting. That needed to happen in an open meeting. Finally, during a closed meeting, the records are very important. The city needs to make a complete unedited recording of the closed meeting, and then it becomes a protected record under GRAMA, which means it's not releasable generally. If the city is discussing the character or the professional competence or the mental health of an individual that they're going to hire, that doesn't need to be recorded, but the presiding officer, in this case the mayor, would need to certify that that's the only thing that was discussed at the meeting. So that's our annual Open and Public Meetings Act training. This is something that's conducted annually, and I thought that was an interesting topic to cover. I wanted to take just a couple minutes. I included in the packet a summary of the legal department's activities for the year. I did not include a portion on the civil aspect that we cover, which is probably the most time-consuming, but perhaps the hardest to quantify. I deal with drop-in questions from department heads on a wide variety of topics every day, and emails regarding contracts and actions that the city should or shouldn't take every day. I did think it was interesting, the city in the last 3 years has prosecuted on average 58.5 cases every week. Last year we prosecuted 2,879 cases. That's just about 55 cases a week. And we prosecuted 23 trials last year. Most of those, as you notice, if you read the summary, are traffic tickets. And I think a lot of times people might think, well, they're just traffic cases, and that's true to an extent, but I think that trying cases serves a vital purpose for your police department. Our department has recently had a bunch of younger officers, and the Utah Highway Patrol section has very young officers in this area. In fact, last week I tried a case with a trooper that had just gotten off FTO the day before the trial. And I think that trying those cases does a couple things. First of all, it allows the officers to get into court to see the weaknesses in their own reports and to self-assess where they can improve. It also helps prepare your officers for bigger cases. When there's a felony drug case or, hopefully never, but a murder case, the trooper or the officer doesn't walk into the court as starstruck as they might be. It is also very helpful to frequently try cases for the city attorney. I think that trial advocacy skills are somewhat perishable, and if you're not frequently trying cases, you lose a lot of those skills. One thing that I thought was interesting was last year we processed 162 grandma applications, and in one of those, Maria reviewed over 15,000 pages of documents. So grandma is an important and a necessary part of government. I think it's important that the public have access to those records, but it is quite the burden. And then I'll just note that I had a list of notable events that the department's completed in 2018. We are looking forward. Maria is pursuing a certificate in HR for local government. She has a degree in human resources, and she's getting some additional training as regards to local government. And I'm pursuing a certificate in criminal sentencing and sentencing advocacy from Arizona State University. But that's my report today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes, sir.
On that grammar report, so 15,000, pages of email to go through. I've begun to try and find that grammar request, and it came to my attention. Maybe they're still there. I can't seem to find them. All of the grammar requests seem to have disappeared from our transparency section of our website. Are they still there? Am I having trouble finding them, or?
No, we are a little behind. Some of these grammar requests have been quite voluminous, but it is our goal to keep updating that part of the website.
And so even the historical ones are still there?
I believe so. I haven't looked at it recently, but they should be.
Okay.
And I'm happy to address that.
And the 15,000 page one, what's the general, what was that all about?
That was some ongoing litigation that we have.
Oh.
It's pre-litigation grammar requests. So, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, declaration of any conflicts of interest?
None.
None. All
Mayor,
right.
I will repeat mine from before.
Councilmember Barber.
On item 5B, affects me as close to my home.
Okay, thank you. All right. We will move on to our consent items. I would like to remove C and D to discuss. Would somebody like to move the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent items minus C and D.
Second the motion.
It's been moved by Councilmember DeCare, seconded by Councilmember Adams. Any comments? Councilmember Adams.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. I removed C and D because I want to make you aware of the appointments for Planning Commission and also the Historic Preservation Committee. So I had Councilmember Page help me interview individuals for Planning Commission, and the individuals who we have chosen for these positions: Steve Lyon, Toby Barris, and Quan Nguyen, who is here tonight, actually. And there were great candidates, just so you know. It's really exciting to me when we have such great candidates come in that it makes it a hard choice. So, but these seem to be the best picks this time around. So I would entertain a motion to appoint these individuals.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Page and seconded by Councilmember DeCare. Any comments? All right, Councilmember Page.
Aye.
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 All right, motion passes 5-0. The next is our brand-new Historic Preservation Committee members, and this is a new committee that will help us with some new events, not events, but making sure that Kaysville residents know about our history and are looking out for ways to integrate our history into our present.
Awesome.
And Councilmember, yes?
And also, as a board for any grant money that we have that will dictate how it's dispersed.
Correct. And Councilmember Barber helped me to interview these individuals, and we have chosen Elizabeth Heath, Brittany Bremer, Rob Danzy, Judy Rigby, Mark Johnson, and Councilmember Michelle Barber to serve on that committee. So I would entertain a motion to appoint these individuals.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Barber and seconded by Councilmember Garn. I'll choose him. All right. Any comments? Okay. Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
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 All right, motion passes 5-0. Thank you. All right. Okay, we are going to move on to our action agenda items. Now, before we start, we have several items on our agenda that are very emotional for people. I just want to reiterate kind of the rules. So there's the sign-up sheet that people needed to sign up on if they wanted to speak to an item. You get exactly 3 minutes, no more. Also, there's no booing, there's no clapping. Also, when we're having our discussion, there's no raising hands out in the audience because I'm not going to call on you. It's just our process. So that's just how we run things. It's not personal. So that is, I just want to make you aware that that's how we're going to run things. All right.
In other words, just think of it like you're in church.
Or in a courtroom. Yes. Thank
Right,
you.
or in a courtroom.
All right. All right, so we are first going to start with a preliminary plat approval for Tyler Estates Phase 3 amended subdivision at 1048 West Tyler's Way. Lyle.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Council, just by way of presentation to the item, you'll recall recently we discussed this property at the end of the cul-de-sac off of Tyler's Way at 1048 West to finish a rezone of the property. It was previously an RA zone, which required true half-acre lots with wider frontage requirements. It was essentially rezoned. It's 1.3 acres, still to only accommodate 2 lots, but to allow for a tighter frontage where the building in the rear, the existing home would stay, and the large garage-type building would then be allowed to convert essentially into a dwelling. Since the rezone, the applicants pursued the platting documents necessary for review of the subdivision. The Planning Commission has reviewed the proposal as well as staff, and the recommendation from the Planning Commission was unanimous in favor of recommending approval to the City Council, the preliminary plat on this item. With that, I'll conclude my items, but be happy to take any questions should you have any.
Thank you. Do we have anybody signed up to speak to this? All right. We will go on to council questions. Any questions on this?
No.
Seeing no questions, I will entertain a motion at this time.
I'll motion that we approve action item A in its entirety.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Adams, seconded by Councilmember DeCare. Any comments? Seeing none, let's go on to a vote. Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. Request to rezone 5.74 acres of property at 1955 West, 200 North from A5 heavy agriculture to R120 single-family residential to the R18 single-family residential zoning district to include the PRUD overlay zone. Lyle.
Thank you again, Mayor. So again, this one we reviewed most recently at the last City Council meeting. Again, I'll go over some of the details and some of the updates. I believe the applicant is here, and you likely have residents interested in speaking on this particular item. The property located on the south side of 200 North is just west of Angel Street, not too far off of the Hill Farm subdivision development and Wilkie Street, right across. The proposal is to change the existing zoning designation. You can see here the dark green of the property is the agricultural A5 zoning district, which currently allows essentially one home for 5 acres of property or primarily an agricultural use. And the home, and there's an old schoolhouse actually that sits on the property that fronts 200, is on an R120 piece, which is roughly half an acre type zoning. You can see the zoning in the surrounding area. There's a lot of brown, which is R120, 20,000 square feet lot, is just shy of half an acre. The light bright green is a true half acre zoning. There's some R114 for third acres in closest proximity to the area. The Ovation Homes, who is the applicant, is interested in developing the property as a senior, active senior community, I believe is the term they use on it, requesting smaller lot sizes and then currently allowed in the zone. They're roughly 6,000 square feet. There are 22 lots on nearly 6 acres of property, and you can see here the concept plat that aligns the existing street to the south and pushes that through up to 200 North, aligns that with Wilkie Street, and then creates a cul-de-sac that services the majority of the lots. The way this works with our ordinances, again, is an R18 allows the number of units within there, but as a common open space subdivision, they provided some open spaces up against 200 North just to act as an entry and buffer into their community. And there's also, a little difficult to see on the screen, but on the bottom left portion of their development space provided is open. It would primarily, is anticipated, would be used for detention with the property. Since the last time it was before the City Council, the developer had talked about meeting with the neighborhood, and some of the concerns and proposals for dealing with cut-through traffic was one of the big items of interest. And discussing that as staff and working with Ovation Homes within the existing development agreement that's before you, was recommended or proposed that there be a traffic median location both at 200 North at the entry into the subdivision, and the developers agreed and proposed to put one also at the entrance to 75 South Street at Angel Street, as well as a stop sign appropriately there at the 90-degree angle at 1700 West and 75 South. Ultimately, the development agreement's been prepared. That's in your packet. That essentially allows them to develop what they're proposing, but to ensure that the development were to happen that way, again, should it be decided by the council that that's a desirable development. As a rezone, remind you that it is a legislative action, so you have your discretion in that decision as to how that fits with the area, the general plan, as your decision making. I think I'll leave it at that, but I'd be happy to take any further questions or provide additional detail as needed after any comment from the council.
All right, thank you. I think we'll go to the public comment. Thank you. All right. First person we have is Michael Halls.
Michael Halls, I live on 75 South. I'd like to thank the City Council for the continuance. I've learned a lot over the last couple of weeks. Gave us an opportunity to talk to the developer and Ovation Homes. Also would like to thank Lyle for all of the help that he had in email correspondence to kind of understand what was going So there's two issues here. One is the rezoning to an R18, and then the other issue is the PRUD overlay and the plat as a concept. One of the things that I kind of learned this last week is an R18 obviously requires 8,000 square feet. We're actually more generous in Kaysville than our surrounding communities. Farmington only allows R110, and Bountiful, for example, and Layton have more requirements for back property space. So we allow denser development in R18 than other subdivisions. But I was kind of surprised, if you would go back to that plat map, that in this plat map, most of these lots are actually 7,000 square feet, some of them 6,500 square feet. So I kind of wondered how in the world that actually was possible. So then I learned about the planned residential unit development. That was very interesting to me because I read the ordinance and basically I was very impressed. I'm a believer in the purpose of the ordinance in terms of it's there to encourage better living, preserve open, meaningful spaces, preserves the character and construction with existing neighborhoods, and to provide a variety to basically give imagination to the pattern of development. So I kind of went in and I said, okay, what is it that basically this ordinance actually applies to this subdivision? So if you look at the open space, we've got the part at the bottom, the catch basin, which represents 50% of the meaningful open space. That catch basin right there, thank you. So this catch basin right here is actually required by statute because this actually slopes downward. So it's I guess meaningful, but it's not something that is being added to the community based on you know, the definition of what I would think meaningful open spaces are. The variety right here is a 19,000 square foot lot. That lot is going to be the future home of Ovation Homes president's father. I think it's a really lovely thing. I've heard he's a very nice person and we hope that he moves in. He'll be a great neighbor. We've got to remember that the whole point of this is not to approve a subdivision, but to build a community and a neighborhood. The other open space is up here near the freeway, the 200 North, where there's no room to actually put another house. You can see that abuts it. And then the other open space, which I think kind of definition of meaningful, is that place right there where the historic schoolhouse is. So I don't know if this actually qualifies as the spirit of the ordinance. I think for the most part, there's a lot of imagination in terms of how to get this many homes into a subdivision. But I don't think I really see what we're doing. We talked to the developer to see if there were things in terms of landscaping, other stuff, representations about the HOA. We asked if we could review the HOA. He didn't decline to give us that agreement. His subdivision, he believes, as it is, and pretty much as it was built in Bountiful and every other community, fits exactly in with our neighborhood just as well as all those other ones. Some other concerns that we have, obviously, is the subdivision changed. The homes are now on this side versus that side. In the Planning Commission meeting, they talked about connectivity to Angel in the future. That probably won't be possible. And if you notice, the sewer lines right here are literally right at the edge of that home, making future maintenance a challenge. So we hope that the City Council will kind of review this plat along with the zoning request and make sure that it actually applies to both the spirit and the meaning of the ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan Burton, please.
Hi, I'm Dan Burton. I own the property. My wife and I own the property that's immediately south of this proposed development. There are 7 of those homes that would back onto my property. One concern that I have, assuming this is approved, and that's the whole purpose of this meeting, is whether the zoning application would be approved or not. A privacy fence, the developer has assured me that would go in. There have been a lot of concerns that have been raised, and I won't speak to those again, about the R120 zone that is existing there. I live in a neighborhood that is R120 zone currently. There would be, and this was part of the letter that I sent to you, and I don't know whether you've all had a chance to review that yet or not, but it sets a precedent for not only surrounding properties, but my property. And I don't know how that would be addressed, or if you've even thought about addressing that, and how that would come under what this particular zone would be. Traffic flow, we've spoken a lot about traffic flow. There's been some more talk about that this evening. The median that they talked about putting down Angel Street and 75 South, I think would not work. That street down there is 34 feet wide. I went over and checked the width of the street at Mountain Vistas that has a median in it, and that street is 49 feet wide. So I don't know how you put a median in there unless you make it a solid concrete median, because most every trailer that came in and out of there would jump over the top of that. And if it's a landscape median, it would be a horrible mess in no time. So I think that's something that would need to be considered. Stop signs were not talked about. I think stop signs both at 1700 West southbound at 75 South and 75 South eastbound at 1700 West would be nice deterrents to slowing traffic down through the neighborhood and getting people to maybe rethink the option of cutting through that neighborhood as opposed to going down and making the turn at the light at the intersection. So those are things that I think I would certainly like to hear addressed that really haven't been addressed. We've heard a lot of comments about the zoning change, but if the zoning change is approved, then what? And that would be a big concern that I have is okay, let's say we approve it, and then where do we go from there? The water we've talked about previously. I don't know whether that's been researched or not. There seems to be irrigation water there and storm water, and I don't think that those can be mixed. I think the developer has addressed those issues. I believe he probably has a good plan if his proposal is approved to handle those, but I think that needs to be certainly looked at, because I've lived there 17 years and I've never known water not to flow through and over that property. So it comes from somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
All right. Jason Sampson, please.
Hello again. So since the last meeting, spent some time learning more about Ovation, drove through some neighborhoods, looked online. They seem like nice homes. I think we also agree that a senior community, 55 plus, would make for excellent neighbors. No question on that. It's clear that we still have some concerns that we want to talk through tonight. Mine goes back to my conversation last time about commingling, the R18 and the R120. I made the point that this is unique, doesn't exist anywhere in Kaysville. In two places on the east, they are adjacent to one another a little bit, but they're across major roads, and so that we're really setting precedent. I decided to look outside of that and say, all right, Ovation's building 3 other developments right now in Davis County. What do those look like? What do they zone as? In each of the instances, the cities, they are in like zoned areas. They've been placed amongst their neighbors that have the same kind of zoning. For example, East Layton is an R16 surrounded by an R110, so similar. West Layton, RS by a school and an R18. West Bountiful's an R110 surrounded by R110. So again, not only is this unique to Kaysville, it's unique to all the Ovation developments in flight right now in Davis County. So it's unique, and we have never addressed that. Additionally, you think, all right, this is unique, we're doing this, so maybe there's some blending in lot size going on that's unique to Ovation and the developments that they make, which again, nice homes. I went and I looked at all the single-family residential, measured each lot, and came up with, nope, we're actually getting the smallest lots. So we're the only ones that have this big variance between R18 and R120, and we're getting the smallest lots for what's being, on average, proposed here. For example, if I measure West Layton, 9672, East Layton, 9092, West Bountiful, 8000, and New Kaysville, this proposed development, 7700. And that includes the 19,000 square foot home that without that would be more like 7,100 square feet per lot. So not like zoning, smallest lot size, and we're the R120 and we're supposed to just be cool with it. I'm not all that cool with it. So the ask here is just that we will try to push that zoning up. Again, we don't want to stop the development. We just want there to be better blending with it. And you talked a lot about diversity and density after the comments last time, and I can totally understand that. I went through and I actually measured each plotting of land in the interactive map for all of Kaysville and found out that the residential zoning that is most used happens to be the one that we're doing here today. So we say we want more diversity to support more density, yet we're zoning it to what is already the most zoned section of space in all of Kaysville. It represents 32% of all of the zoning of residential space. If we wanted to bridge that gap and provide more buffer, there's R110, R1LD, R114, each represented at less than 5% for all of Kaysville. So if you're looking to meet more diversity and density, there are less representing zoning options that would expand that space, which is really what we want as the R120 portion of the neighborhood. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary Hoffman.
Good evening, I'm Gary Hoffman. I live on 75 South. 2 weeks ago, after receiving poor notification for a rezone in our community, you honored our request to table the zoning vote. For that, I appreciate and give you my thanks. As we have met with the developer and with the community, we have been pleased with some areas of the proposed development, including efforts to minimize traffic and the impact of the traffic in our area. Tonight I request 2 additional items that I don't think have been adequately covered. First, I'm still not convinced that we are adequately planning for stormwater runoff. The flooding of basements on Seymour Street, just across the street and upstream of this proposed development, indicates to me that there is a need for an additional study to be done on this issue. Before voting, I request the city engineer review further the impacts of that runoff and flooding from this project. Second, tonight we have witnessed the implementation of a historic preservation committee. It was brought to my attention that the small brick home on 200 North is possibly a Kaysville historic site and is included as part of the development plan, but nothing is in writing in regards to its preservation. We would like to ask that this be addressed and be written into the development plan. So tonight I request that this rezoning vote be tabled again until these 2 very important aforementioned items are resolved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Knapp.
Hi, my name is Sue Knapp. I spoke at the last meeting, and our neighbors, in fact, submitted a letter opposed to the rezone proposed through an R18 high-density zoning for this new areas. I can appreciate all the comments my neighbors made, and I thank them for providing it. I've sent letters to each of you, some a text. Really, no one is outright, I think you've heard, no one is outright opposed to change nor to development. But we need to be smart about what change incurs. My husband and I are against the rezone to the R18 for this relocation for this particular area. It doesn't fit in with the existing neighborhood, as prior speakers have attested to, and it's 100% against the current master plan. Despite that the mayor, thank you, but despite that the mayor is interested in changing the master plan and updating it, a decision can't be made on this development for what might be. It needs to be based on what is. What do we have now? Changing the master plan, voting on development to fit personal agendas, it is just not right. I voted for probably every one of you because, well, I guess probably not you because you were at it.
No,
right?
you didn't vote for that.
So,
But you can this year, though.
Shameless.
Wow.
Shameless.
I'm
Also
losing
think it's
time.
borderline not legal.
Yeah, that's true.
I voted because I felt you'd be good listeners, right? And a voice of the citizens of Kaysville. So not to the developers. I can appreciate we want development and we're looking for change, but again, we need to be smart. I took some photos and sent them to those people who, on the council and mayor that have texts or cell phone numbers online. Those are pictures of the homes that exist on our street, 1700 West, 75 South. These are huge homes, large lots. Again, the new development doesn't fit in with that. Every one of the homes is unique that we have on 1700 West and 75 South, every one. The only thing they have in common are materials. Brick, stucco, stone, all lovely. The development won't have those things in common. They all look the same. The only thing different is they have a different color. Essentially, you're looking at a row house. Single out row housing is really what it comes down to be. I went to some of those other developments and took photos. All I'm saying is that the rezone needs to be on a vote of whether we rezone to an R18 and not a 55-plus development. So really, the only option to this proposal is a no vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Luke Barber, please.
Thanks for the time. I too live on 75 South that's adjacent to this development. But prior to that, I actually lived on another development on Havenwood Drive. And there's actually a very similar situation to what this is. The zoning on Havenwood is an R120, and the homes are a 55-plus community, and those lots run just exactly like these ones up against those R120 homes, and they made great neighbors. So by and large, I don't really have too much concern with the zoning being more dense here and the 55-plus community. I do, however, have one concern with the water issue there. Having grown up in the area, this is right in my backyard. That's always wet. It's always been wet, so I'd like to see how that's addressed. But beyond that, I don't really have a problem with the development. I think it's a good development overall. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's everybody that we have. So at this time, we'll go for council questions. Let's go with Councilmember Page.
It was almost unanimous.
Yeah, this is for Lyle, actually. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Lyle, some of the questions we had here tonight, is dealing with the stormwater. The question I have for you is that process that the contractor and developer will have to go through, how is that? Can you explain so the people can understand exactly how that works? I mean, this process, this isn't something that we have to decide. Isn't this part of the process when you go through the developing of the land and everything else?
Yeah, correct. So in a typical scenario, when we consider development of property, we'll look at kind of things in 3 steps. First would be the zoning. What types of things do we want to see on that property? And then after that, they do a preliminary plat and then a final plat process. And typically during the platting or the subdivision process is when we consider more of the technical issues, utilities, how those connections work, water issues, the details in traffic and so forth are more typically dealt with at that process. I would say that because of the nature of a rezone or a legislative action, should it be necessary for you to feel comfortable to make that first step of a rezone, you can ask for different things, and that's where we've seen, to this extent, we have a development agreement that starts to dive into the design and details of the project. So, but more normally, and ultimately, that final plat process is where all the engineering is done. We have standards within our ordinances as to how the stormwater could be collected, as an example, at what rate it can be discharged back into our system. We look at the slopes, designs, ensure that those who have had rights and water in the past continue to receive that, and that all takes place at that particular juncture on typical development.
Okay, just a follow-up question. So what happens then if say they bring the engineering in and they come up with a plan, the city accepts that plan, it goes forward, but it just doesn't work that well? I mean, whose dime is it going to be on to fix that?
Yeah, that's a challenge. So if they've shown their engineering and we've checked that engineering, that the design meets our standards and approvals and it's built, I might look to my right to the city attorney to help a little bit, but I think if they've proven and then they've built that system that proves that, they've met a lot of their obligations. And we often run into scenarios where afterwards where it's shown that a design is insufficient, fails, or didn't work as expected. Most developers are willing to work and cooperate with us to get items corrected. They've got reputation to uphold, they've got residents who are moving in that they need to have improvements for. I don't know that I feel comfortable simply saying we go after them later down the road to correct it in all cases. And I don't know if I could maybe ask Mr. Mills, our attorney, to
Yeah, it's a
speak
hard
about
question
some.
to answer with the limited facts that we have. I mean, in a lot of times, the professional engineer stating that's why you hire a professional engineer, is
Right.
so that they assume some of that liability. That's not always the case, depends on a lot of different factors, but that's typically where I think we would start.
Okay, just a follow-up question, but typically, to help me understand, so typically though, I mean, that's why engineering is presented to the city, and when they put their stamp on that, they're accepting and saying to the city, as well as to the property owners, as well as all the neighbors, that this is gonna work, and that's their reputation, and that's what their insurance is for, and everything else. Isn't that correct?
Correct. Yeah, and probably the instances where things get a little more iffy is when the engineering is all accurate, everything's built and it's functioning appropriately, but perhaps the elements around it change over time, and that's where we've seen some challenges. But otherwise, that is the DOPL licensure and importance behind those credentials is, they're backing their work and ensuring that it will function as they've stamped and approved and designed.
All right, appreciate that, thanks.
Councilmember Adams?
I could intercede from experience. We have a 1-year warranty period, and I'm not going to. I don't want to go out into the weeds on this and belabor this, but we have a 1-year warranty period, and when that warranty period is up, pretty well all parties except for the city have left the room, so to speak. So, and I can gladly provide hundreds of thousands of dollars that we've paid for historically before your time, Lyle. This has nothing to do with you, but to where we have paid. And I'm not trying to say that this is going to happen on this development at all. I'm not aiming that at all. But that is the cold hard facts. Like let's take this particular development out of what I'm saying here. And cold hard facts are, we as citizenry, when engineering mistakes go wrong, we pay for them. Not every last one of them, but on a large scale, very many of them. The one I referenced last time was down on Bonneville Lane, where the irrigation, tailwater, and also stormwater was commingled into one system. It was repeatedly flooding out a couple of homes, and we spent over $100,000, over $150,000 fixing that one. So that's where the concerns stem from. That developers, good developers with good reputations, I know there's several in town, and I believe Ovation Homes to be one of those who would gladly come to the table a couple years down the road and say, you know what, this is an error and we should be a party to it, but most don't. So we end up getting stuck with the bill on that many times.
Okay, Councilmember DeCare.
So speaking to Councilmember Adams and Councilmember Page's point here, I mean, I am a true believer in engineering. I mean, as an engineer myself, you do the research, you do what it takes, understand the facts, take a look at things, and you're willing to make that assertion that, yes, this is the way it's going to work. Are there errors? Absolutely. With there being an issue here, and just to read from the staff report here, where it says, finally, as of this date, this report, staff is continuing to look into what water is feeding the ditch currently into the property. It is generally believed that with the recent 200 North Street improvements, irrigation and stormwater systems were kept separate and existing water rights and access were maintained. Once we rezone things, it's done. And that's land use 101. I would really hate to see us as a city, make an error where, down the road, who's going to end up paying for this? Well, we, the city, the citizens with the houses that are built there that are going to be flooded or property damage and things along those lines. I guess where I'm at with this right now is there still are a lot of moving parts here with this. And the density, I'm okay with that. But I think that the development of it, I think the overarching concern that from all the citizens that I've listened to today and a couple of weeks ago and planning commission meetings and stuff, they're not opposed. You guys aren't opposed to development. I guess you just want it done prudently and you want it done right the first time, so there's no redo. So, and I guess that's where I'm at with this, moving forward with this. I want to make sure that this is about doing something that we can assure is maybe not 100% correct, but we want a really, we want to ensure that to the best of our due diligence, that every T's been crossed and every I has been dotted, and that this has been looked at from every angle as we move forward on this. So I think, at the end of the day, that's kind of where I'm at with this process.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Adams.
Did everybody get a chance to read this engineering letter that's before us? So, I do believe that the water issues, you can always pipe around anything. And this is definitely a very respectful letter from a very respected engineering firm. So, yeah, absolutely, you can engineer through situations, to your point there. Sure. But I don't know, I would argue that if you're okay with the density, I don't know if something that can be engineered around should stand against, the rezone. I'm not okay with the density, to be clear where I stand. I think this is a stretch of some higher density along major streets. I think that is a zoomed out view of that. So, another concern or question that I would have is the sewer. And I imagine there's gonna be land drain in here too. I don't historically recall that Kaysville City allows sewer and land drain mains to leave the right of way. Am I looking at that view right? At the cul-de-sac at the end, do the sewer and land drain mains turn and go north and then west again out to Angel?
I may ask the developers here, they might be able to speak better to what those lines are, but so a land drain system, I'm not positive it would be part of this development if they're at grade or patio homes, if they're not trying to deal with the water table. However, a sewage system, it's up to the sewer district's standards, and so they do allow, and there are different situations where their mains run through private property. They certainly require easements over them and the ability to access them, sometimes surface treatments as well to get their equipment on top of it. Most commonly, they are in the street right of way, and so it would be certainly less common, but there are probably many examples around town where they have permitted it. But again, it's based on the district standards, and we work with them as we go through the subdivision process to review that they've received what they need before we permit development.
And I just want to clarify, council members, we're still in the question phase, so.
Oh, right, I have a
questions?
question.
Okay.
A bona fide question.
Has there been exploration? Is the sewer district approving this concept for the main?
So generally, yes, the sewer district is aware of the project. They've not done a thorough review on it because it's not a subdivision application at this point. But I've not received any word from them on concern with capacity or density or proposal with the project.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to get into the weeds. I do realize this is a rezone application, not a preliminary plat application. But I think when we do consider rezone applications, we ought to also consider, the functionality of the property, if it will fit within ordinances and whatnot, for what's being requested.
Councilmember DeCare.
I can see your point to a certain extent there, but they are two separate land use applications. With regard to that, though, can we have the developer come up here?
Yes, please.
So, Mr. Frost, if you can come up and maybe address some of these issues and some of these, because I know I've read your email, and I know that you have talked, and I know that you have some answers to some of these questions.
Sure.
So,
I think some of the things we're talking about, it's a little different because you usually go through that process of preliminary plat and final plat, and you find some things out as you go through. Andy's a great engineer. Our engineer's a very reputable company. Trust them, and so that part of that's a process. But prior to meeting and after the comments last time, we also did some additional research and met with the neighboring property, Mr. Anderson, who farms it. Had an extensive conversation with him where the water comes from. A lot of that water was taken care of as far as the storm water when the new road was the new construction on 200 North was done. There was this year we had 4 100 flood years, all in one year, and so I think it's a little different. We had more water than normal. All I would say is that really it's just the tailwater from Anderson. That was from his words. We'd pipe that down through the property, through the normal channels that it goes present, other than on the property, it'd be in pipes. We feel very comfortable with it. Obviously, we want it to work. One of the things that we looked at for our clients was we felt like there needed to be an additional catch basin on 200 North. We were going to propose that in preliminary plan because it's a wider gap, and so that water all puddles and comes over the curb, and with one more additional inlet box, that would really help that scenario. So yeah, we feel comfortable with it. Of course, we want a great subdivision, and in every subdivision we've done, we haven't had issues with the city after, and that's really important to us.
Okay, Councilmember Garn, please.
Oh, a question for you, Mr. Frost. And I understand that a lot of these technical issues are taken care of by both your engineer, city engineer, working through the details once you get to that point. And our job is more, does the zone make sense? Does it fit the general plan at this point? And then the city professionals take it from there on the plat. But as long as the question has been asked, I would just ask you, I think Mr. Burton brought up the point that how do you put a median on a 32-foot width road?
Yeah.
And then I have one other question as well.
Yeah, you bet. The reason we wanted a development agreement, because if I'm a citizen or on the city council, I want to make sure that what we approve, when we approve a zone, we know what we're getting. And that was important for us to have that here today. So the day after, I sent you an email that kind of went through that schedule and met with one of the residents there as a consultant with traffic and had a good conversation with her. The medians we're happy to put in. Of course, the size and the types of scenarios may change. We're open to those changing. We just wanted to make sure that the city and the citizens felt comfortable that we were willing to, make that effort to hopefully subside some of their concerns.
Thank you. And then the second question is regarding the possibly historic brick building on 200 North. And apparently, Mr. Hoffman stated that there was an intention to preserve that. Is that accurate? And is that something that you would feel comfortable putting as a condition of the rezone?
I don't know if I would say condition. We're open to it. We're contributing a lot of things already, and what that means, and as far as money's contributed, we're talking about really a fairly small piece of ground, and so absolutely, we're willing to talk about it and be open to opportunities there. But as far as a contingency, I'd rather just move through and see what, that's one person's opinion, and we'd love to have discussions with the new committee and see what we can come up with.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Frost while he's here?
I have a question for Lyle.
Okay,
I guess.
I think we're good. Thanks, Mr. Frost.
The R18 zone, when I look at the R110 zone specifically, why does this development not fall within that?
Yeah, so technically the density fits within kind of the intent of the R110. So again, the 8 and 10 reference the minimum lot size, 10 being 10,000 square foot. If you think of an acre, it's just over 43,000 square feet. So you divide that by 10,000, you could fit 4 units in an acre, and that would cover the proposed density. And R18 allows a little bit more, between 5 and 6. The reason for the request is the way that our PRUD ordinance is set up. Once you go and defer slightly from the typical lot size or a smaller lot, then there's a certain open space required within a common open space subdivision. So I can do the math. I'm not exactly sure why the math works the way that it does, but based on the smallest lot and the average lot size and the total number of lots requires a certain amount of open space. And so under the R110 zoning designation, I don't believe there's sufficient open space to go with that. One option could be just, maybe I should hesitate with this at the council level, but so we have other subdivisions in town, I believe, where And I don't know the Ovation that is proposing to plat it this way, but for example, a front yard is a limited common area, could be counted towards open space. Should the council consider items like that acceptable, then I would think we'd probably have a scenario where you could call this an R110 and fit it under that zoning designation. But I think the more simple route, as I've worked with the applicant, and more clean and clear cut to me, was it meets the R1A based on the amount of open space provided and the lot sizes they've proposed.
Okay. So just to clarify, lot size qualifies within R110. It's the open space that is not qualifying, as it is right now.
Correct.
So if we went for an R110, we would either have to designate current space, like you said, front yards, or additional space to be granted to.
Yeah, correct, and I wouldn't be able to give you the exact square footages off the top of my
Yeah,
head
it's
as
okay.
what's lacking, but
Yeah.
Yeah, essentially,
That's consistent
if the council deems other areas could count and qualify as open space, I believe it could meet that criteria.
And one follow-up question, when we're counting front yard space, how does that fall in accordance with the intention of open space to provide a better community and places that are amenities to the community?
Yeah, so I'll dive into the language here, but it's a tough one to answer because it's very subjective as to what is the development providing. And so you heard some of the concerns or opinions on that from a resident this evening, and it does become highly subjective. And I think that's in part the intent of the PRUD and the rezone process is perhaps it's a better community or meets that because you have an association that's taking care of that, and so you have higher assurance that you're going to have cleaner, well-maintained lots versus the individual ownership. Perhaps could be a component of that. Now, whether you agree with that or not is, the prerogative of the council to determine if you feel that that's appropriate. I think that would likely be how it's been interpreted or looked at in the past, where that's been permitted.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any more questions from council? Okay, Councilmember Garn.
I move to rezone 5.74 acres of property at 1955 West, 200 North from A5 heavy agriculture and R120 to the R18 zoning district to include the PRUD overlay zone.
Just a question, do we need to put a development agreement, or is this a separate thing?
Separate thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, so do we have a second?
Yeah,
on that?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Garn, seconded by Councilmember Page. Any comments at this time? Councilmember Garn.
Yeah, this is, I think I can maybe speak to the concern that residents might have, because I've had this same concern. It's one of the reasons why when the Smith's Marketplace was proposed to come in very near my home, why I became more interested than before of the city and zoning decisions and got involved. At first I was quite opposed, but then after what I realized, especially serving on the Planning Commission, that West Kaysville really needed that development there, and I could not see any better place where it would go in West Kaysville. It's very interesting too, as public opinion right next to it, where I live, was very opposed, as you might imagine. And the further out you moved in West Kaysville, even just a little bit from there, people were very for it, because the need, I think, was great to have services on the west side. So then we changed to sort of mitigating the impacts. And I'm glad in this case that there has been some concern listening and mitigating some of those impacts. And as far as the Planning Commission recommendation, having served the Planning Commission, I probably still take that kind of a view of, I still put on my Planning Commission hat, does it fit, the general plan, does it fit with the ordinance? And also the question of, for example, Planning Commission can't really consider property values. That would be so hard to really make an accurate assessment, that even though it's a legislative decision at this level to try and assess what the impact of property values would be. I think obviously if you're putting a coal mine next to existing homes, that would be obvious impact. So I definitely try to consider what would the negative impacts be. And then also in the PRUD, it talks about, does the existing height, scale, mass of the new buildings coming in, does it match the surrounding area? And so that's a good question. As I go through all of those criteria, it's close to a major road, it's off of a major road. It actually, from the legislative point of view, I think it's very important to have a mix. When it talks about the mix of developments, a senior living center, I think that's wonderful to have some seniors. I'm going to be a senior pretty soon if I'm not already, so I don't know. I'm definitely not ready to give up my half-acre lot in West Kaysville anytime soon, but that day may come when I don't want to take care of a large lot. And so I see that as a positive in weighing the decisions. R18, it seems smaller, but as I search for the negative impacts on the surrounding homes, I have to admit I don't see them in this case, and so that is why I made the motion to approve the rezone.
Councilmember DeCare.
I, like Councilmember Garn, have served on the Planning Commission for a great number of years, very familiar with land use issues, and I think sometimes we like it, well, I don't say we collectively, but sometimes things get commingled with the actual rezone, which is one issue, and then a preliminary plat, which is another issue, and then the final plat, which is yet another issue. And in the rezone application process of all this, we're usually met with some things that were just up here earlier, some kind of an architectural, conceptual kind of an idea and stuff. And sometimes we want to think that, well, this is what it's going to look like, and this is what it's going to be. And that's usually not what it is at all. Like I said, they're two separate independent things, two separate independent actions that we're left to administer. And I think in a case like this, where the people that I've listened to and the people that I've spoken to personally, and the emails that I've read, are not really so much opposed to the development aspect of this as they are to the other issues that are going to come before us down the road. And on that point, I say that this is where trusting in engineering and development and things along those lines, those are the things that need to take precedence to move this thing forward. So with that being said, that's where I see things. That's where I look at this through my lenses, and I feel that it's fairly objective. And you look at things from all sides, and you make a decision that's going to benefit the city and benefit the surrounding community, and move forward from there.
Councilmember Barber.
Yes. I'm confused on, so the motion did not include the development agreement.
Didn't they say it's separate? Two separate motions.
So will we address that right after this?
Yeah.
Development agreement itself?
The one motion passed and then the other.
So it's hard because to me, they are so tied together, but I will stick with just the zoning right now. I feel like, as I've spoken to a lot of residents my entire term, but especially the past couple of weeks about the two items up for rezone tonight, I do understand how hard it is when you are not involved with the process of either updating our master plan or strategic vision to have things come as a surprise right by you. And I feel like I want to validate that feeling that you're coming from. I feel like the R18 zone, even if it's tied with this development agreement, I would like to look at the R110 zone at least, because I feel like it would be a better fit, because that's the lot size we're looking for. So that's what I would love to have more discussion on, what we can see there as far as the zoning. I feel like there's a lot of good thought behind that, and it would still support the nature of this development.
So with The very next bullet says consideration of development agreement and rezone request. Now, the current bullet we're working on doesn't talk about a development agreement at all as advertised per agenda. Are we at liberty to add an item to our action item list of a development agreement, Mr. Mills?
You're not adding an item. It's the same item. It was in the packet. The development agreement's in the packet. So it's clerical error on the agenda, but you're okay to consider it this evening.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. The sewer outflow, Mr. Frost, are there easement arrangements that have been made? Is the neighboring property owner willing to sell easement rights to accommodate that?
Yeah, that was part of the contract and agreement with them.
Okay, so they are willing to allow that to go through.
Yeah, it's part of the contract. It's part of what we're purchasing. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it's the same seller?
Yes.
This proposed piece, okay.
Yep.
Okay, got that. Just kind of a point about, you know, the topic was raised in the public section about the general plan being revamped. I think to consider such drastic measures against our general plan as it currently sits right now, and I've seen this over the last 3-4 years I've sat up here, the constant argument that is used is that one darn sentence that, you know, some higher density along, you know, major routes. And I've seen that like stretched and stretched and stretched, you know, and I think to honor those who have been in, you know, this sector of town for a very long time now and who had a vision, you know, implanted into their minds, which was the general plan that they moved in and subscribed to for them to have to keep getting browbeaten over and over and over to these requests. I think on the cusp of you know, rewriting the general plan, I think this is a little bit of the cart before the horse. And also on that note, just quickly as far as that goes, I want to say to you, Mayor, I think that there certainly ought to be, and hopefully you'll entertain this because the topic's on the table of this general plan stuff, there ought to be, you know, similar to districting, you know, like when campaign districts, election districts, we ought to ensure that committee who is overlooking, you know, the general plan, aside from our body, a citizen body of equal representation from equal districts throughout the entire city ought to for sure be on that panel. That's enough said on that, but. Except
that I do want to mention this is going to go to the entire public. So anyone who wants to participate is going to participate.
Sure. Just a minor suggestion. I'm not saying there's anything nefarious going on by any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that it would be great to make sure that if, you know, have a citizen committee involved with that also, with the creation and the oversight. So I think it's rare that we see a sewer main taking this direction in town. I just want to say that. I didn't well verse myself with the current ordinances, but I think it's rare. So.
All right, let's take a vote. All right.
I have another comment on
yes.
the zoning.
So,
as far as the line about along a major roadway, I think that's something that obviously the general plan is subjective, but really most neighborhoods access 200 North at some point. And so I think it's difficult to put this in the same category as, you know, one that would front 200 North with their driveways or their fronts of their homes facing 200 North. That is what it means in my subjective view. That's what it looks like. And so I don't see that as a contingency to take into consideration on neighborhoods like this, where they're embedded into another neighborhood, just because they have a roadway from they have an entrance from a major roadway. That's my thought on that. And I would like to see if we, can I add a substitute motion at this point?
You could.
I would make a substitute motion that we entertain adjusting the zoning to an R110 and discussing implications for that.
I have a quick question on that, and it was before you made the substitute,
first
if I may.
You need to second it.
Oh, wait for a second. Okay. Well, he questioned his motion.
We need to have a second before we have discussion.
Okay, so
Mayor,
we
it's
made an
actually-
error on that one then.
It's actually the applicant's application.
Okay.
So this body should either approve or deny the application.
Okay, thank you.
Can't alter the application without the applicant.
So it would have to be yes to this one or Yes or no? and then come
Correct.
back.
They'd have
Okay.
to reapply.
Yeah.
Good
Okay,
point, Nick.
got it.
That's right.
Thank
If I,
you.
if I may, could I still ask the question? Since that
Yes.
motion's off the table, the
Yes.
substitute. The question would be, if we went to, so how many lots again are right now on this are at 1-8?
I believe the current proposal is 22 lots.
22? And without forcing anyone to do math on the fly, if we shift to R10, hip shot guess, how many lots?
So it's 5.7 acres, so you could still probably do the 22 lots.
Okay,
More
so
than that.
for this council member, that's a moot point then, to shift to R10. That's not open enough for me, so.
Okay. All right, we're going to go to a vote. Councilmember DeCare.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, motion passes 3-2. Thank you. That was a tough one. I really appreciate the good questions. All right. Let's move on
Okay, point
to
of
the
order.
development agreement.
Oh, sorry, yeah, okay, sorry.
So let's talk about the development agreement. Did we want any special presentation on this? Anything more?
If you would like me to go through it, I'm happy to do
Yes,
so.
please. Would you?
Okay. So the development agreement that's currently been established, well, get to the good stuff, is essentially set up that not just Ovation Homes, but whoever develops the property would have to fall within and meet the same provisions, produce the same product. So there are some assurances within there for that. It essentially sets up, starting on the bottom of page 2, some standards and guidelines that determine what would take place within the development. First of which is architecture, showing that each dwelling would use exterior construction materials such as brick, rock, stone, stucco, hardy plank siding. Talks about building height and square footage. All buildings would fit within, it's got the 30-foot height maximum that's allowed within our current ordinances, and have a minimum square footage of 1,900 square feet. All street parking and hardscape improvements, including curb and gutter and sidewalk, would be constructed and improved in strict compliance with our ordinances and code. They would provide a 6-foot privacy vinyl fence surrounding the perimeter of the subdivision, provide landscaping improvements, including front, side, and rear yard landscaping. The HOA will maintain all front and side yard landscaping and the perimeter fencing. Developer would provide stop signs and traffic medians as depicted in Exhibit 8, and that is this map that we've shown here, showing the medians at Angel and 200 and the stop signs there at the corner of 75 South and 1700 West. We would also review detention during the subdivision process and ensure it would meet appropriate detention requirements, and they would ensure that any water systems necessary to be constructed would be done with the subdivision. So a lot of the unique things to this, I think, come into play with the traffic items in particular. The fencing, maybe the minimum lot size and architecture that you would see are stated within there. Ultimately, we talked a little bit about the traffic already, but our working with Ovation as staff, from our understanding and discussion with them, was they'd previously shown doing the traffic median along 200 and possibly a speed table along, keep getting the street names mixed up, at 1700 West, the north-south street. Our preference was, if cut-through traffic were the biggest concern, to put in the median island diverter along Angel Street and 200 South. We had some concerns with our public works and public safety regarding the speed table. And so we discussed with Ovation Homes kind of switching the speed table for that extra median. And anyway, that's what's currently shown within the proposal for you. I don't know if there are specific questions regarding those items, but I think that page 2 and 3 of the development agreement are really kind of the meat of what you're looking for and what the developer has agreed to with this process.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go to questions. Councilmember DeCare.
So are we looking for a separate motion in here, Nick? We are, okay, all right. Okay, yeah, that's the only question I have. So.
Okay, questions at this time? Okay, Councilmember Barber.
Can you go back to, I see the 1 stop sign on there. Is it still just the 1, or was there, it says stop sign 2?
I'm not sure what the 2 is specifically, so what we anticipated being on there, I think as we discussed it as staff, was the 1700 West southbound traffic stopping before heading on to 75 South Street. I've heard the comment this evening if there's interest in the east-west direction as well and stopping it that way, we could look at that. Perhaps the developer was anticipating doing both, so perhaps a clarification on that would be in order from the council and the developer this evening.
Yeah, go ahead.
Question is just 2 stop signs versus 1,
Yeah.
and 2's we were planning on 2, so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, other questions at this time?
I have a comment.
Okay, I need a motion first.
I'll move that we accept development agreement for aforementioned residential subdivision as proposed.
And I need a second.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember DeCare, seconded by Councilmember Page, and now we can take comments. Councilmember Barber.
On the speed table, I spoke with Lila quite a bit about this, and I think the point of order that makes a lot of sense is that there's always a process followed for traffic calming policies, and this is one of the options that's implemented after data has proven that it's consistently a problem. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's our concern as staff is we've got limited experience with them, at least within the city, and some concern that if we put it in without some of the data backing it, that it may open the doors to require them elsewhere. So my initial understanding was a little bit more that there were real anxiety or concern from Public Works and our fire in particular on actually providing their services with it in place. Having spoken further with them, I'm of the understanding that it's not their favorite thing for some of the things that they do, but they could certainly live with it. But it primarily came down to a concern of, is it necessary and justified? And we would like, from a staff perspective, to, if deemed so, to go through the process that we have set up before putting it in. Which, unfortunately, or for better, means the subdivision would be in place and we would monitor traffic.
So my comment is twofold. Number one, I respect that process. I think that's the right thing to do. Let data warrant these actions. Follow-up is, we have a developer that was willing to pay for it, install it, and like you said, that would be over by the time the data comes through. So one option would be putting in a clause that should data warrant the need for additional traffic calming, we could still have the developer agree to that later on. If you can expand on that option.
Well, certainly it's an option. We could put it in there. I'm not certain if the developer would be amenable to that. I think with a time frame, at the very least, that could be appropriate of request.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Adams.
Who gathers this data? Is it in-house or is it official traffic studies or?
Forgive the extremely general oversight of the traffic calming study, as I don't have it before me, but typically it starts off with a neighborhood that would see an issue and raise a concern. There's some limited data that the residents are requested to do, and then it escalates from there to, based on their findings, to further data and counts, which deem, or depending on the data that's retrieved, you look at different options that could resolve the issues that are found. So there are multiple steps within it. Typically it starts though with the neighborhood seeing an issue, doing a minimal amount of data collection, and then it moves up from there.
So we have a pretty official mold as to the process we follow for such.
Correct.
That the initial, I don't want to call it clamor, that can sometimes be construed as a rude word towards citizenry, but the initial concern is raised, and it must elevate 2 or 3 steps from there to official data.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, on a typical traffic concern in a neighborhood such as this, we would see that. And again, at failure of giving you the very specifics of the policy, but that is where it starts, is those eyes on the streets, the residents who live in the area familiar with it, raise it, and we ask them to do a little bit of data first before we spend more energy, time, and resources to dig into it further.
And so, and then that data is kept and stored and readily available for view.
I believe so. Our police department typically administers that program on the traffic calming, so I'd have to reference to them as to some of the details on what they do with it under the traffic calming policy.
Okay. All right. So any other comments on the development agreement at this time? Comments? Okay. We're going to take a vote. We're going to go with Councilmember Adams.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. All right. Okay. And now we're going to consideration of development agreement and rezone. Is that the one I just did? Nope.
You're
It's
in
the
the right
Ogden
spot now.
Clinic. Okay. Consideration of development agreement and rezone request of 4.7 acres of property at 1325 West, 200 North from RA Residential Agriculture to the GC General Commercial Zoning District.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. By way of introduction to this one, the property is directly south of the Smith's Marketplace along 200 North. It has frontage along the rail trail to the west side of it, and its neighbor is the Kaysville Bible Church on the corner, if you can envision that, and you can see it better here in the aerial imagery. Currently, it's zoned RA, which again is half-acre lot-sized residential development. The request we have from the applicant, which is Ogden Clinic, is to rezone it to general commercial for the intent and purpose of their future use for a medical office clinic. What you can see here is a portion of the development agreement, which we can go into in some detail, just giving an example of some of the architecture and style of what they typically build from their clinic. The Planning Commission has reviewed this over a couple of meetings. The applicant's done some neighborhood meetings as well that they could speak to with a little bit more detail. But ultimately, the results of that are the development agreement that's, again, there in the packet before you. Maybe I'll briefly go over that. This one's a little less specific than, at least as far as the site design, as the one we just saw. So that became part of the discussion with the Planning Commission, as they had originally put concept of how it would likely to be developed with the building up closer to 200 North Street and access points onto 200 North with parking to the south. They essentially utilize both properties that you can see highlighted on the map here in yellow. So it does take up the majority of the development. But they are interested as they continue to refine exactly what services will be provided there to keep it open, to maybe how that facility will ultimately look and be developed. So you'll see language to that effect within that agreement. One of the items of note that had come out pretty strong, I think, as part of the process of reviewing this through the Planning Commission, were concerns with the traffic. And there are some 2 points, I guess, of interest to speak to. First, just being traffic in general, Flint Street, 200 North intersection, its current functionality, and some of the delays that residents see there, and some of the concern. And so we had a traffic study that showed essentially that it's already, as anecdotally stated, not everyone's favorite intersection, and it showed that it was operating at a D grade. But the engineering report showed that with some optimization, that could be brought up to a C level of service, not failing in either case, but existing conditions that are predating this proposal. So their data and information essentially concluded that, notwithstanding whatever develops here, there's some things to look at, and it wouldn't make or break the ability to optimize that or make it worse one way or the other. So it's kind of raised some things for the city as a whole that we need to look at and consider. The other item being the rail trail crossing. There's a great deal of interest and concern with that based on this proximity to that facility. And so you'll see within the development agreement, there's some talk at time of building permit when we typically review the site plan and some of the details of staff, that they would work with staff on the turn movements, any signage that might be appropriate to help ensure that that's a safe intersection. They do want to make sure that they've got the ability to have some left turn movements and left in and out, but we would have likely multiple points of access into the site where that can be achieved. But the section closest to the trail hopefully we'd be able to deal with that as well. I believe with that hopefully gives it at least a general introduction to it. The applicant is here this evening that could give further details on their business and their clinic. And of course, I'm happy to take any questions you may have at any time.
Okay. Would the applicant like to speak before or after the public hearing?
I'll speak after.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right. R. Neil Van Leeuwen, if I got it right. Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's never happened before. No. First off, I live in Mountain Vista's neighborhood. It's interesting to hear about the cut-through things and the median from the other development, because my neighborhood is a cut-through neighborhood and the median doesn't work on that. I'd like to thank the council and mayor for your time. You guys do a lot of work, and I really appreciate that, and you have a lot of hard decisions to make. As far as this property goes and changing, I think it's a big change to go from RA to commercial. I was at the Planning Commission meeting. It seemed to me like there were several people on the Planning Commission that salivate over turning property commercial. One thought I had today as I was listening is I was wondering if changing this to commercial now is the right time, or would the right time be after the plan has been developed over the next few years for what do we want Second North to look like? The traffic is a huge problem. If I told you I was a physician but I got C grades in medical school, you might not want to come to me, and I don't think having a C grade on an intersection is desirable. Oh, it's better than a D grade, but a C wouldn't get me into medical school. And then the other, that crosswalk, when we were coming to one of the meetings here, an accident happened right there at the crosswalk where one car rear-ended another car. If the car wasn't in front that got rear-ended, that car would have driven through the crosswalk into the people that were crossing, which was a mother pushing a stroller. So I think there are a lot of things here that maybe this is not the right time to change this to commercial, that more needs to be done, including the master plan. I personally am not in favor of the commercialization of Second North, but to me, it seemed like the Planning Commission was when I was at their meeting. I don't think all the citizens in the city need to roll over and play dead and say, well, whatever you want to do. There's lots of commercial land available that's already zoned commercial that a clinic could go into, or any other business. But I do think that maybe this is not the right time to change this from residential to commercial. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Kevin Porter, please. Oh, sorry. Yep, I see you. Chad Hawkins.
Hello. I appreciate your time. Glad to be here. And I also live in Mountain Vista subdivision. My property, my backyard is right here, and I'm going to have front and center view to whatever is built here, along with my neighbors. A few of them are here tonight as well. In general, I too am not in favor of the commercialization of Second North. I think that's a statement worth mentioning. The three major concerns that I have are safety, building height, and lighting. Safety, again, I was also witness to that accident, which was right there. As someone who uses that as an athlete, I'm always crossing. My children go to Smith's all the time, and I think it would be impossible from this parking lot to take a left have access to Second North, take a left and immediately make that crosswalk, because there's too many things to consider. If you take a left, someone is eventually going to be hit at that crosswalk. That's my opinion. And I witnessed that accident that Neil also saw on the way to a meeting. Regarding building height, I hope that this proposal, this agreement that's going to be shared with you is detailed. This is a business, it's a commercial, it needs to be profitable, and they're going to use their square foot space to make money, and if it's cheaper to go up than out, they will likely do it. I appreciate Ogden Clinic. They've been very nice, very open. They've represented themselves well, but I think they're going to do their best to make money, which they're a business. That's what they do. And to go up is cheaper than to go out. So I hope that they are willing to, I think they told me that they are originally planning a 3-story building. A 3-story building does not, as Mr. Garn, Councilman Garn said, it does not match the mass, scale, or height of neighborhoods nor the church next door to it. A 3-story building would be it would not flow and not look natural for that location. So I hope that they're willing to commit not to have a 3-story building as a part of their agreement. And I'd ask you not to keep it open, and we'll wait and see and decide that later. Please prevent a 3-story building for the way it would look and the views it would block. And then finally, lighting. Regarding lighting and signage, please look to Smith's as a good example, in my opinion, not America First. From my backyard, standing on my trampoline, I can read a book from the light that comes from America First. How did that happen? Someone fell asleep. It's very bright, and if those lights that are right across the street are from the signs or the parking lot lights, it would really be a deterrent. It'd be a bad thing for anyone, all the neighbors who already live around the area. So please watch for lighting. I hope that when the agreement is proposed, it's very limited, well-defined, and not open. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chad.
Benson Black.
Good evening. I spoke at the Planning Commission meeting. I think, in fact, Lyle's reference to left-hand turns and considerations of left-hand turns came largely from what I had to say, so I'd like to repeat that message as briefly as I can. My background is civil engineering. I do have some training and experience with the design of intersections and traffic management. I don't believe the traffic study that was commissioned by the Planning Commission really addressed the core of the issue. It was essentially based on the notion that additional counts, an initial number of people, how that would affect the traffic light at Flint. When you're taking into consideration traffic control, traffic management, you have to consider traffic flow. You have to consider conflicting turns, left turns, right turns, and where they would want to bounce into each other, and how that addresses the safety at the issue, here. Primarily the concern, everyone has said it, I think the council is aware of it, is the bike trail. There's a lot going on there. There have been some close calls. I've witnessed them, a few myself. I use that bike trail quite a bit. The argument that I'd like to make here is that fundamentally, I think a case can be made that the business base for a commercial business in this location, particularly Ogden Clinic, is going to be from West Kaysville, and a good portion of that from west of this location. So there will be someone coming in sick, go to the clinic. Where they want to go, they don't want to go to work. They don't want to go out the freeway. They want to turn left and go home. I think that contrasts with if it were residential. I think based on experience coming out of Mountain Vistas, everyone turns right. Everyone turns right. Where are they going? They're going down to the freeway to go to work. So I think it matters. I think the Planning Commission listened very carefully to this information, took into consideration. They are absolutely concerned about safety at this location. However, they divorced whether or not this was a commercial business versus residential from the issue, believing that wasn't a big contributor. I would offer a different opinion. I believe residential, you're going to largely get right turns. Commercial, especially for Ogden Clinic, people going home after being sick, they're going to want to turn left. So I think it matters. I would argue, make Case's argument for leaving it residential. I'd also like to suggest strongly that if this does go forward, that turns out of that property be limited to right turns only. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Luke Barber.
I actually have no comment on this one. I signed up on the wrong line.
Okay. I was gonna say-
Speak anyway. Come on, Luke.
No,
We'll go to Amy Jarman, please. No. No, you may not.
I emailed all of you today, and there were 3 of you that emailed back, so I appreciate your response. I won't go over the things that I emailed you, but I would ask that it not be decided tonight. I think traffic is huge, and why are we pushing something through when it's just adding to the congestion and the safety that's involved in that crosswalk? So I really ask that you not push something through until we figure out the traffic in that area. If it's figured out, then after that point, there are a couple things. I feel like the developmental agreement is very vague. Ogden Clinic has been great, but I felt like as we've asked them questions, there have not been specific answers. I sent pictures on my email as far as the trees. The trees are a huge buffer for our homes. I'm right there on the back. And I ask that you make sure that if this is passed through, that Ogden Clinic is not able to take down. There's not very many trees that I think is on their property line, but oops, someone in accidentally took down trees they weren't supposed to. Those trees are a huge buffer and they're beautiful, so please don't let those trees be touched. I agree with Chad on the lighting down at We Care, down West Kaysville, and those lights that have just been put on Hill Farms along 200 North are so bright. They're awful. So I ask that you look at the lighting. Also, the traffic. And then the last thing is just, Ogden Clinic has stated that they aren't going to build on this parcel for a while, but there is a concern that what happens when they decide to build in 2 years from now, they decide, oh, maybe this isn't what we wanted. Oh, guess what? We're going to sell it to someone else, and now all of a sudden it becomes commercial that we didn't agree to. So I ask that if this does pass through, that the development agreement be attached to Ogden Clinic, and then if Ogden Clinic does not build, that it go back to agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Kevin Porter now. Thank you. And
We've never had any oopses on trees being taken out before. It reminds me of a media story. Anyway, I'm off topic.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. Just to respond, I think really mostly to the development agreement. We've gone through several process with the Planning Commission, as you know, and met with the residents, really trying to be good neighbors. That's kind of who we are and what we're all about as an organization. We don't want any of these guys behind us to be frustrated, upset, or mad, right? That's part of the process of going through and working with them. A couple of things to identify in the development agreement to address some of their concerns. One of the big concerns was fencing or a non-visible structure, a wall. We agreed to that as an 8-foot structure on the kind of east side property of those residents along there and the south side. Also talked about trees. Our idea is to plant more than is required by the city, several rows of trees to try to protect those houses along that area, along the borders of the rail, the south side, and the east side there as well. When we talk about lighting, certainly lighting pollution is key and critical, right, of being a good neighbor. We will have lighting engineers, if you will, that will go through and make sure that we have our parking lot lights that are constructed so light is facing downward, that they are shorter, lower light poles so that the light's not as high, but key safety for employees and patients after hours is critical. We're happy to have those parking lot lights turn off during evening hours after the building is closed. Is to have no additional lighting concerns. The goal, of course, would be to have that lighting pollution go down to 0 by the time it hits the property, and we'll be working with city staff and our own engineers to make sure that we get the right lighting plan in place. And to address the building height, I think it's important that we recognize initially we were talking about a third-story building. He's absolutely right when we talk about size and scope and where we want to be. We've come off that since meeting with the residents. In the development agreement, it states that we're going to comply with city code, which currently is 35 feet. If we have to go higher than that or need to go higher than that, we go through a complete redesign and motion that goes through that has to be approved. We'll be involved with the residents again in discussing it. So at this point in the development agreement, we're requesting that we comply with the city code, and if we have to do something different in the future, then we'll address that in the future. But that's not tied to the development agreement or the purchase of this property at this time. So with that, I'm happy to address any questions, and more than anything, we're happy to be part of the community.
Thanks. Any questions? Council members. Councilmember Gurn.
Yeah, so a 35-foot restriction, does that preclude a 3-story building?
Yes, it does. Yeah, we would need about 50 feet to go 3 stories. So 2 stories would fit just fine within that within that code.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilmember Barber.
Can we talk about the traffic circulation? If we pull up, we're looking at the map there, so I'm confused. It says that one point of access where left and right-hand turn movements are allowed. So you're saying that there would be a minimum of 2 access points. One of them you're wanting to have both left and right.
Yeah. So when we initially kind of put together a plot of this property, as we started addressing some of the concerns and where the building would be and how far it needs to be away from the Bible church based on the zoning, the flow of the property for emergency access, we really kind of thought we need to come back to this and address that and work with the city to make sure that we have the proper egress out of that site. We put in the development agreement and working with staff just a necessary 1 left-hand turn. If we do have 2 points of egress or ingress, then we would have 1 probably right. I would guess we would push the right and left-hand turn as far east, but we would work with the city to accommodate signage, appropriate safety protocols to ensure that we can provide as much safety as possible.
I think this is, thank you, a question maybe for Lyle too. When I think of traffic flow, if we only had the right-hand turns there, obviously there's going to be a natural progression of people needing to go turn around at some point. So does that put so much strain on the adjacent intersection? What have we seen that any problems that this is causing by only having 1 exit?
So if all vehicular traffic were required to head eastbound with the right-hand turn movement leaving this property, I'm trying to think if there's a good example, but what you might start seeing and are U-turn movements at the intersection. People may start cutting through other driveways and parking lots to turn around and head left. Whether or not that's more safe or amenable to allowing the left-hand turn movement, I guess would be another question. But certainly if people do need to head westbound, they're going to find ways to do that, and there are legal ways to do that with the U-turn or something would be my first guess at that intersection.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions for the developer? Councilmember Garn.
I did forget one. So on the traffic study, we've talked in the past about possibly if the numbers warrant it, 200 North could become a 4-lane road. And of course, once the West Highway is built, then that becomes even more important. But how does the clinic, the traffic study, the estimated additional traffic, how does that, percentage-wise or numbers-wise impact the existing traffic flow?
I forget the exact numbers. So the clinic, mostly what the traffic study looks at, and one of the highest issues of concern is peak hour traffic. So as far as an overall capacity and the total number of cars that drive Flint 200 North, the streets themselves are fine, especially with the ability to potentially restripe it. But at those peak hours, when you have the highest level of traffic and the function of the intersection is mainly what it speaks to. And so essentially what it addresses, it looks at how many people are making which turn movements, how long they're waiting at the signal, at kind of a 15-minute intervals over an hour period between those peak hours in the morning and the evening. And many of those movements had A or B level grades, a couple of them C. I think there may have been 1 or 2 that I think did have a failed movement according to the study at this intersection. So percentage-wise, I'm going to fail to get you the number and probably the direct answer to your question, Councilmember Garn, but the engineering firm that conducted that JUB looked at the estimated peak hour traffic provided by a facility similar to Ogden Clinic, medical clinic on the books, and what that would add into the peak hour, and it was their assessment that for positive or negative, it wouldn't affect it one way or the other based on the current or optimized signal scenario.
Thank you. One additional traffic question. When the Smiths came in, I think shortly after that, one of the things that the city did was to straighten up the existing rail trail, went at an angle, and that made it harder to kind of see bikes and pedestrians as people were turning out from the Smiths, and that was kind of straightened up a little bit. There's a jog in the trail, and certainly that makes sense that would be helpful, at least from a layman's perspective like mine, not a traffic engineer, of course, but let me just ask this question. So, and I don't mean to make this personal about me, but all of our residents, I use that a lot as well. My wife and I go biking all the time. And I have to say it's very frustrating to me that people apparently, and these are my neighbors and they're good neighbors, but they don't understand. Like, I would stop for a pedestrian or a bicycler even if there wasn't a crossing, but the number of people that basically break the law, because the law is when you see a bike or a pedestrian, you're supposed to yield, and particularly at a crosswalk or an intersection, and some people actually speed up. So I'm bringing this back in. So the question is,
They're trying to get out of the way.
with that sort of speeding up, speed, I can definitely see the risk there of someone turning and not seeing a bicycler, but it's so close, it's relatively low speed. So I'm just looking at the added safety risk, of a slow speed left turn compared to the already speeding, which no one goes 30 on that road either, and then not stopping for pedestrians and bicyclers.
Is there a question?
That is a question.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes,
Really?
Sorry, let me
Call
rephrase.
Guinness. Call him up, Stroh. Call
The
him
question
up.
is, what is the safety impact, because it's
There's the question.
lower speed, so because it's lower speed with that left turn compared to the safety hazard that is already there with speeders going through, not acknowledging pedestrians, is there that much added safety risk, I guess, to having a low speed? I mean, it's immediately there, right at the trail, a low speed left turn. So,
weighty question, and we'll see what I can do, Councilmember, to answer it. I think you're correct, and it is a low speed movement. You're accelerating essentially from zero if they're at the parking lot at the clinic trying to leave before you travel a short distance to get to the trail. Where I would say probably most of the safety concerns lie is just the overall mass and weight of a vehicle. It doesn't take a whole lot to, perhaps they're not fatalities, but cause injury to a pedestrian. And it may not be a pedestrian incident that occurs, so if they're actually watching pedestrians but forget to watch for cars that are still going 30, perhaps that's where it becomes more serious. So I think there's a general feeling at staff level that there are things that can be done here that will improve it, even if there is access at least into their property over in that area. We have, just as stated by yourself, a couple years back, realigned the trail to shorten the distance, put in the overhead signal. We're likely going to be looking into changing that from a yellow flasher to a red hawk. There are center island type treatments or other signage or striping or you name it, stop bars, all things that you don't see there now that we would like to consider that I think can improve the situation. And likewise, the development of this particular property, there may be ways that they're able to interface with that to make a safe, visible, appropriate exit that would
thank you.
help.
And you just answered my last and other question, but one sub question from that, I guess not last question, is what would be the before this development actually goes in, before the Ogden Clinic goes in, what would be the responsibility of the developer to help with those improvements?
You know, I think it's our findings through the process that these are existing problems, not necessarily caused by the developer. However, within their property and on their site, you know, we do feel that it's appropriate that they design it and deal with that specifically so that it doesn't create the problem. So it's very much highlighted, dealing with the public on this, that we've got some existing things that have not been caused necessarily by this, but we do want to make sure it's not compounded once it does come back.
Thank you.
Lyle, are we at liberty? I mean, I know in other cities, a lot of times when development comes through, commercial or residential, mainly commercial though, those developers are required to sometimes reconstruct intersections at their own cost. So for this eastbound traffic, you know, could we say, hey, you've got to have a turning lane? Like if the access is on the northeast corner of their property, could we require that they develop a turning lane in there to alleviate congestion? It's eastbound congestion, I get that, and there's a big concern about westbound for the trail, but still, eastbound is a lot of congestion too.
Yeah, I would say it's not out of the question. So typically that process, it's considered an exaction. So if you can prove and determine based on the data that they've created the need for something and therefore participate in the paying for it or installing it, the city does have the ability to do that. Where it gets difficult is, again, they're just one piece of the puzzle, and so more what we do is where we collect impact fees that should cover those things. So as they create these additional impact fees, it's more proportional to their limited share of the need for those items. That's where it comes in, is sort of they're covering it. But we could theoretically, you know, if the data showed it that this user has created this much traffic that has merited these improvements through an exaction process, require that of them as a condition of approval.
Thanks, Lyle.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll move that we get this right here. So I'll move that we grant rezone request of 4.7 acres of property at 1325 West, 200 North from RA to the GC for Mr. Kevin Porter and the Ogden Clinic.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember DeCare, seconded by Councilmember Garn. Comments at this time?
Substitute motion.
Okay.
I'll motion that we deny this item, you know, based on it just being still too much in its infancy and needing further discussion.
Motion dies for lack of a second. We'll go to the original motion. Comments at this time? Councilmember Adams.
I'll say that, I mean, this isn't necessarily a no vote to, you know, Ogden Clinic or to any commercial user on this property, but we're facing some serious constraints here, you know, and the trail absolutely is concerning. You know, I wish that Beth Holbrook were still here so that we could perhaps negotiate and strong arm her into a pedestrian overpass, you know, on the UTA right away there. That would be awesome.
Who's paying for that?
Hey, there's a little bit of sarcasm there.
Well, no, it's a serious question.
Let's allow Councilmember Adams
Sure.
to finish his comment.
Impact fees, any kind of things.
Okay.
So, hey, that's a great concern. I agree with you, Councilmember DeCare. That's a very valid concern.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you want to have a discussion on budgeting of it, we can do that another time. But the fact stands, if UTA would allow that, that would be absolutely fantastic, would it not? Budgeting aside, would it be fantastic to have a pedestrian overpass right there?
Is that to me?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
You
not,
know
this
what?
is an aside.
This is
No,
comments
yeah,
right now, so keep.
You allowed him to illegally solicit votes tonight and said nothing. I say no more.
Disagree.
So I agree. The commercialization with Second North, with the revamping of 89 and the coming of Legacy Highway, we don't know what things are going to look like. And we're a unique situation there because we're going to have another corridor that's going to be called 200 North, which is a needle threading all of those paths together. So it's going to get pretty darn busy. Fifth South and Bountiful, you know, I don't think we're on quite the hills of that, but if we keep commercializing Second North without some serious traffic studies and serious traffic, you know, resolutions, 20 years from now, people are going to be cussing us, just like we're cussing the people 20 years ago who didn't build that stinking right-of-way big enough and who didn't plan for this. So that's a predicament, I think. And we're not saying no to Ogden Clinic. We're just saying, hey, perhaps, I mean, I guess you guys aren't, but this council member is not saying no to Ogden Clinic. You could probably do, I'm shooting from the hip here, you could probably do your 3-story building over by Boondocks. And I think America First would be willing to cut you off a piece of land over there, and you'd have freeway frontage. So we're not saying like, no, we don't want this particular user, or I'm not. I'm just saying, hey, yeah, I too share the concern that 200 North is getting, pretty backed up. There's, perhaps some planning that could have happened 30 years ago that would have helped out at this point. So those are just a few of the things. And, I think that as far as the development agreement goes, should you guys vote this through, I think the development agreement should absolutely stipulate that if you go over 2 stories, the rezone is null and void. There's no, hey, we've got the rezone, but hey, now we kind of think we need 3-story, because it's kind of like, the camel's got his nose in the tent at that point, so.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Tahir, please stay on point.
I will. I'll stay completely in my lane. So much to Councilman Adams' point here, where
I won't interject with budget questions. How about that?
Deal. So my point here with this, though, is I do agree that serious traffic considerations are certainly an issue. But however, though, I would almost argue the fact that since this is almost twofold. So we know that Ogden Clinic isn't going to be building or constructing this or beginning construction on this for at least another couple of years. Is that right, Mr. Porter? Yeah, a couple of years. So we're also
speculated.
Well, speculative, regardless.
Stop.
So
you didn't tell him to stop. You didn't when he called the budget thing. You didn't tell him to stop.
That's enough.
At that point,
your double standards you
That
need to
is
take
enough.
a look at.
Quiet. Okay.
at that point, the West Davis corridor is going to be fully on its way and fully under construction in that. And the traffic load on 200 North is going to look completely different then than it is now. So I think kind of having, valid traffic data right now is almost a moot point. I mean, we could do all the traffic study we want to and the numbers and take a look at everything. But we're still 10,000 people from build out too in Kaysville. So, we're going to have more of a population shift out in West Kaysville over the next couple of years too. So things are going to look considerably different on 200 North in a couple of years than they do right now. So I guess my point here with this is, if we go through the motions and we do these things to make valid, traffic, concerns and gather data and metrics and all that, what good is that going to do when the whole landscape of 200 North is going to look completely different than it does in, now as opposed to a couple of years? So I guess that's, and I find that it's a valid and compelling argument. So, this is a bit of a sticky wicket. I get that, because construction's not going to start straight away. It's going to be delayed a while, and like I said, the landscape of this entire area, Flint Street, 200 North, all that, is going to look slightly different. So,
Thank you.
I would say that we're also not
Councilmember
bringing to the
Adams.
table the fact that the property directly to the north is looking at, higher density than what you guys approved tonight. So you're talking to, and that's been tabled. Where that is, I don't know. Is it kind of waiting in the wings to figure out what to do here? I don't know. And I'm not here to shame any property owners. They have a right to do the best, highest use of their land. But these traffic issues are serious. That trail is a serious concern, and this property is not the only thing on our table right now. It's the only one currently right here on this desk, but right here on the back burner is that one waiting to come back to our agenda that's been tabled, and that's going to further congest that trail. So you can laugh about a bridge all you want, but that's an expense I'm willing to take a look at for the safety of the kids. That trail has a very high use.
Okay, comments, Councilmember Barber.
Thank you. As far as traffic that goes on this, I don't think between now and when this building is built, for what I can see, I think traffic will only get worse. So the most we can do at this point and the most precaution and planning we can do, the better. And I think I've spoken with lots of residents in the area about this. I appreciate all of the advocacy. We've seen some really good examples in the city of how residents partnering with development can work really well. Smith's has really good examples, some that could have, in the area, could have been better. So I think it's fantastic. I would never discourage someone. As far as traffic goes on there, I don't think we can understate how important it is to take care of safety there, both in this development and as a higher level as the city. I'm very protective of active transportation. Everyone knows that's something that's really important. I mean, we're gonna have bikers on that road. We're gonna have people with strollers walking. We have to take that into consideration. And as far as the rail trail goes, I mean, the proposal I've wanted forever that I see as the only really fitting solution is not an overpass, but to bury it like a tunnel that we've seen in lots of other areas.
Tomato, tomato.
It's not tomato,
Please
tomato.
do not interrupt.
I agree with you on that concept
different.
too.
Please do not interrupt.
And it is very doable. I mean, we can put different lights, all sorts of things. It's going to become such a danger on there, and it's such a highly used thing. That's all I can see. I don't think we can put all of that on one commercial use that's coming in, but I would be open to seeing how we can set aside impact fees for that specifically, because it's only going to get more dangerous. It's terrifying right now. It's going to get even worse as it comes in. It's truly the only access into that great development that we have. So, in short, I don't think we can understate the need to be very cautious with the traffic and put every precaution and measure possible going forward.
Okay,
Allow me just to correct. The tomato was not like, it was in support of what you're saying.
Okay, quiet.
Like the U of U tunnel that goes
Got it.
under whatever
You're
south.
not
That's a great idea.
recognized. Thank you very much. I want to give Councilmember
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Garn a chance to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, great discussion on, really an important issue, safety. Take it so seriously. I guess, though, that I want to paint it in perspective, and I think, again, I can speak from some experience, because coming out on Flint Street, I mean, it's just unbelievable, the difference in traffic, and particularly at the time when there's rush hour. It's almost impossible. A lot of times I will make a right turn, and we have a very small subdivision, but right across from that is the industrial park, and they line up like crazy waiting, and sometimes it's impossible. Other times of the day, okay, impossible to make a left-hand turn, so you just concede that point and turn right. So, I totally get it, but this isn't a new experience. So every place, Kaysville has been a very rural community. I've lived here 34 years, but it's not anymore. And every place where you see development and you see more people, these issues, have to be dealt with. But just to put it in perspective a little bit, even, many years ago, there was a real safety concern before the overpass with the railroad. That's a huge safety concern, and as a matter of fact, some lives were lost there. And sometimes I think, if I don't think carefully about it, I think, okay, when that West Highway comes in, there's going to be a lot more traffic. But actually, that's not necessarily true. There might be a little bit more, but on the other hand, traffic can flow two ways. So now it flows out from the west to the West Highway. It actually might ameliorate a little bit of that. The other thing to consider is West Kaysville, which at one point several years ago had almost no development. I remember when Barnes Park was the first really major development other than just rural homes in West Kaysville. Now it's fairly built out. So, I don't know the exact percentage, 85%, 90% of the available land, something like that. So you're not going to add a whole lot more. The third thing is, when we have to deal with these concerns, there are things that can be done. For example, if the traffic study warrants it, if the traffic flow warrants it, you can expand 200 north to 4 lanes. If you build it, they will come. Maybe. But, I'm just saying that it's not all negative in terms of the future. If you put it in context, there are some things that could actually make the situation better, or at least not get a lot worse than it already is.
Thank you. Before I call on Councilmember Page, I want to implore council members, please, to not interrupt one another, especially when we're talking about things. Things can get heated, and if we interrupt one another, it gets worse. So in order to have civil discourse, I'm imploring you to not interrupt. That is all I'm saying.
If we could ask you to do the same and to equally reprimand when someone does.
Councilmember Page.
Yeah, just a quick one. I think the thing we need to be careful, first of all, when it all comes down to it, I think we could all agree, we just don't like change. And, you know, I grew up in West Layton, and when I go down there now, I tell you, I got a stomach ache to see where it's changed. There was no subdivisions there when I was there. And now you see all the development. And I know that that's a concern that all the people in West Kaysville has. It used to be just a farming community. Now it's crowded. I think the thing we need to be careful is because of that, we don't punish the people that want to develop their land. They have every right in the world to do it. I think our key is what do we do to make it as safe as we possibly can? And I think that's what we should be looking at. And I just don't see where this development is gonna make Second North the death trap of the world. You know, it's just not. And I think that it's going to add a certain amount of value, not only to the citizens of West Kaysville as well as East Kaysville and all the citizens. I think it adds value to a lot. But I guess the concern I have is when we get to the point and we see the crowd and stuff, we'll take care of it. And we'll do the best we can to minimize that. But it's going to happen no matter what. So we can be a part of the process or we can just allow it to happen. And so I think we need to be very careful how we approach these kind of issues.
Thank you. All right, we've had a lot of comments. I think we probably need to go to a vote.
Can I have
one last
thing?
comment, please.
Just as a point of clarification, with my initial conversation about a traffic study and things like that, in no way, shape, or form was I discounting the importance of the traffic on 200 North. So I just need to make a point of clarification with that what I'm saying is that 2 years from now, when this building is constructed, things are going to look certainly different than they are now. Traffic study's fine now, sure. The numbers are definitely going to change, though, in the next couple of years. So that was my point of clarification.
One last comment from Councilmember Barber.
Thank you. I'm just going through a list for development agreement. I know there was a lot in there. Some came in before. The trees that we talked about, I think they've done a good job of even going above and beyond that. My one question is on the actual 200 North, on like the park strip of there, are those trees included there? And I will, that face 200 North. And the reason I'm going to say that is because there's data that shows trees on a road like that really do decrease speeds of traffic and calm it down so it feels more like a residential area. So do you have plans to put trees on the park strip? Sorry, make you come all the way back up here.
We're happy to consider that.
Okay.
So it's not part of the development agreement right now. But
okay.
We'll work with the city on whatever we need to from a...
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to a vote, and it's Councilmember Page first.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Okay, motion passes 4-1. Thank you. All right, I am going to call a 5-minute break.
Mayor, can we,
that
yes, was sir? The rezone, could we now have a motion on the development agreement?
Yes, thank you.
That was, okay.
It's the same.
Yes.
Same.
All right. I would entertain a motion on the development agreement.
I'll move that we consider and approve the development agreement in conjunction with the 4.7 acres of the aforementioned property.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Decatur, seconded by Councilmember Page. Comments?
I'll substitute the motion.
Okay.
That it stipulates that the building If the building goes above the threshold of height, the zoning is redacted.
Mayor, could I speak to that?
Yes, please.
If the city code only allows a 35-foot building, there's really no option to make a taller building.
Correct. All right, so motion is,
I'll hold you
dies.
to that.
Okay, dies for lack of a second. All right.
Comment?
May I make a
First-
comment on that, Mayor, as I think
Yes.
it's relevant? So the code states within the general commercial zoning district is a 35-foot height limit. However, by conditional use, they can exceed that. And so
Shut the
that
front
would be the
door. Get out.
process
You don't say.
Should they choose to
Thank
go
you,
above and beyond.
Mr. Attorney.
Okay.
So he's correct, but it's got a separate provision that does give a
That's
stipulation.
why I said I'd hold him to it, because there's always.
Okay, so, but the motion failed for lack of a second, so we are reverting to the original motion, and we will go, any other comments? Please make them brief. Councilmember Barber.
Did we, this is a question for both staff and the developer. Do we feel like we addressed the requirements for the active transportation, the traffic? All I see in here is that the one turn, the other turn, there was a lot of other discussion. Do we need to be more specific here, or will this be revisited? I'm just not quite sure. I want to make sure we're careful.
Sure, so I'll talk just maybe briefly to procedure, and then whether or not it's sufficing, we can discuss that. So procedurally, once the zone's in place, the use that they're requesting is permitted. So the process from this point would simply be working with staff. We look over the development agreement to see if these terms have been met, as well as other provisions of our ordinances and standards. Does it adequately address active transportation or the other traffic issues? I think as staff, we feel comfortable. I don't know that it talks as directly to active transportation other than how it relates to that trail. So it's not necessarily requiring elements of this development to add new lanes or new facilities or something of that nature. But as it relates to it, I think our ability to work with them and possibly limit turn movements, I think has been our highest item of concern as we looked at how it might possibly develop. I think this does adequately give us the ability to say no, and they must concede to that based on the language.
So as far as the traffic implications, I mean, we talked about the
So overall with traffic capacity issues, we don't have any concern from a staff level. The function of the intersection based on the existing data that we've got and the impact of this particular facility on that, we feel that it's adequately dealt with as well. But again, our findings and the report that we've produced indicate this facility on its own is not going to make or break one way or the other the existing conditions.
And I see in here, it just says that review, design, and improve access that ensures safety into and out of the subject property. And I'm assuming that can be expanded when we look at it beyond just the entrance and the exit, left and right turn.
Yeah, so it's open to allow for quite the extensive discussion. Where it does get very specific is talking about the access in and out of it. And again, the applicant was interested in making sure that they felt it was important to have at least one point where their customers and staff could leave at one, but we felt that where it gave us the ability to very specifically limit one movement directly next to that trail is likely where that would happen. Again, council gets the final say, but I think from a staff perspective, we felt that that was adequate for what we would do with our typical review.
And then just to clarify on this development agreement that's attached to Ogden Clinic, should they decide to not develop as this agreement lays out, what would be the process then?
Yeah, so, and I probably failed to give that with my initial report. So the Planning Commission, when they did their review and recommended it, asked for within this very specifically that the assignment clause be looked at and how that was managed. So it's been beefed up beyond what we typically do. So what that means, should Ogden Clinic not move forward, it's quite extensive in this particular one as to how that transfers and ensures that the same quality and same product is able to be carried forward.
And you did put that in the report, but I wanted to state it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anything else? Okay. All right, we're going to a vote. Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. And now I am asking for a 5-minute break. Thank you.
You are so smart.
We take
Yeah, you have a problem. I mean, you said we would fix the problem if there's a problem.
No, we do the best to, we do the best to fix it.
I mean, he was speaking exactly what all the citizens feel, and none of you guys feel.
Who's
So
right?
worried.
I disagree. The fact they're trying to find a gun to kill myself?
No, I'm just saying, it'll get worse too.
Oh, that's fine.
What I'm saying is though, is what a lot of you want to do though, is you just want to stop development completely and take away land rights, is that right?
So you spend as much time in that center.
If you guys just let everyone change, like, I mean, he also said at the rate, if you just don't stop things now, you're gonna have a West Lake. Like, you guys have to make the correct plan now, because you guys are failing. I mean, absolutely.
Well, that's why we're going forward with our master plan and a strategic plan, because we haven't done that in Kaysville.
You're coming out and you have cars going 50 miles an hour right at your nose. Like, you have these poor residents here who are out trimming their trees, and they're about to get hit by cars. Like, 7 is not wide enough to be those things. You have no.
The number of people at one or the other? Yeah.
You guys are not doing a good enough job of preemptively. You're going to keep plowing. You're going to keep plowing holes. You guys don't fix it.
It's either going to be that or it's going to be residential.
What do you guys think of?
I'm saying 200 north of Flint is a problem, and you guys have no plan to fix it. I mean, Lyle said it's 3 meetings, no planning commission. You have no set plan right now on fixing 200 north. Correct?
A decade.
Yeah, what I'm saying is I compare that to, I think it has issues.
Plow through kids and parents and strollers. Let's get them right to the
You're making it
hospital.
worse. That's exactly the issue. You guys are fine letting it get worse. That's the bottom line.
You just have to look at it and do the best you can at all costs.
And you guys are failing.
I think these decisions have been made a long time ago.
You guys are letting it get worse and worse by current decisions you're making.
They're just generally.
It's just like a lot of people.
It's fine. You're not
They
fixing
just
it.
want to shut down. You do need to break this hot topic up.
No, 2 in one night, Lyle? Seriously.
I'm calling you on that one, man. Okay, I don't care. I mean, I completely slaughtered Larry's question.
No. Exactly right.
I mean, there's.
We don't redo everybody's engineering when they bring it in. We say, oh, you were a PE, then you went to college. Right. Well, yeah. Did you guys know that St. George Airport, the St. George Airport is closed for 4 months? It was engineered as well. So, shit happens. Sorry.
It does.
Yep. Well, things change, right?
This development affects that development.
Yeah. You know, it's like water, especially.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's the problem.
It may not have been designed.
That's the best answer you could have given.
I was excited to start talking about traffic.
You were ready?
No, well, yeah, what I would have chimed in with, this isn't the agenda. It has nothing to do with the agreement. That's what I would have decided. Oh, those check marks. It's crushing it. Maybe we should have Megan read for that. So
All right, council.
Well, it's just this meeting will be end by 10, right? But I guess it's
I don't think there's any way it will. That's going to be a half hour.
All right, council, let's get back to work. Okay. All right, we're moving on to item D, a resolution amending the Kaysville City budgets for fiscal year 2019. Dean Story.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight you have two items related to budget for your consideration. A public hearing was held 2 weeks ago. There was no public comment during that public hearing. We believe that both resolutions are ready for your adoption. The first one is to amend the 2019 budget. It amends the capital projects fund budget. We don't anticipate any amendments to the general fund budget. The second item for your consideration is to adopt the modified tentative budget along with the city consolidated fee schedule and the compensation schedule.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anybody signed up to speak to this? You have that one, I don't think. Oh.
No.
Hold on. No, no one is signed up. Any questions from council?
No.
I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll move that we approve resolution amending Kaysville City budgets for fiscal year 2019. Do you want two separate motions, Nick?
Mm-hmm.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember DeCare, seconded by Councilmember Garn. Any comments? Seeing none, we'll go to Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 4-0. Then we'll go to a resolution adopting Kaysville City modified tentative budget for fiscal year 2020, the adoption of Kaysville City consolidated fee schedule, and the adoption of the compensation schedule for city officials and employees.
So moved.
Wait. Huh?
I'll move that we approve resolution adopting Kaysville City modified tentative budget for fiscal year 2020, the adoption of Kaysville City consolidated fee schedule, and the adoption of compensation schedule for city officials and employees.
Was it second? Okay, guys. I usually don't do this, but I just want to say that I am not comfortable with including the compensation schedule for city.
Well, can we just have comments now that the
Hold on.
motions-
Yeah. Is this the city council? This is not city council, right? That bit, is that included in the?
It's included as part of the consolidated, or included as part of the compensation plan, yes. But you could also add, you could delay implementation on something like that.
Okay, all right.
Until after this year's.
Maybe address that. Yeah.
Did we?
We did, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember DeCare, seconded by Councilmember Garn. Any comments? Councilmember Barber.
So, sorry, that threw me off. So, remind me, we're approving this fee schedule, all of these fees that you've laid out here. Okay. Is it now the appropriate time if we have questions on some of them?
Yes, let's do questions.
And I had this bookmarked before I came here, but I can't find it right now. But can we look at the business fees that we had talked about, the business licensing?
I skipped over questions. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, but isn't this a comment question?
Absolutely.
It's fine. Dean, can you remind me where that is? And like I said, I had found this previously.
On the business licensing fee?
Yes.
It's part of the consolidated fee schedule. It's probably 2 or 3 pages in.
It's the second page, top of the second page of the fees. It's, I think, the third page. It's under community development, page 2.
Oh, yes, they're at the very top. Thank you. I remember when this came up because there's been a change. We no longer require these licenses, right? The business license is not required by, oh, thank you.
So under this, there are, let me go down here, business license fee, so I'm looking for it with you. So the type of licensure that's not required is a major home occupation license, or I apologize, a minor home occupation license. Currently, I'm looking at the fee schedule here to see if I can pick that one out. I think it's $35 a year for the home occupation for a minor home occupation business license. They only pay it on a voluntary basis. So if they want a license, they are paying it, and that fees remain the same for some time. But we are currently collecting that. And I don't believe there's proposed change to that rate under the schedule.
I think I had looked at the other one, and I thought it had increased to 65. So thank you for that clarification.
Anything else? Okay, all right. All right, it's been moved, it's been seconded. I think we're ready to vote. Councilmember DeCare.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes 4-1. Okay, we are now moving on to our work items, and we've been looking forward to this. Our technical advisory committee's recommendations. Andre Lortz. And he's backed up by Brett Tarbox. Thank you also for being here. Yes.
Just point of order. I'm wondering, you know, I don't know how long this presentation will take, but
yes.
your rule for 10 o'clock, we
Yes.
may want to have a motion to extend if
I would
necessary.
entertain a motion to extend the meeting.
So moved.
Okay.
I motion to extend the
Yes,
meeting.
and a second. Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Andre Lortz, representing the Technical Advisory Committee. I will try to be brief, although there are quite a few details to the recommendations tonight. We strongly recommend that the Kaysville City Council proceed with a project to install fiber optic cable throughout the city. We don't feel that the city can afford to wait any longer. Not having fiber connectivity within Kaysville City will become a negative impact on home values and business interests within Kaysville in the future. The feasibility study indicates that a significant majority of responses supported the city facilitating the improvement of connectivity within the city. We feel it is very important that Kaysville City own the fiber infrastructure and operate it as an open, competitive network. An open network means that any provider can offer services to the residents if they agree to a network access agreement. Based on financial modeling and information from various sources, we recommend the city employ the utility model where all residents contribute to the installation of the fiber infrastructure but are not obligated to connect their home to the infrastructure or purchase any service from providers who operate on the infrastructure. We feel this model provides the lowest risk, best long-term value, lowest overall cost to residents, and most competition for services. To reduce the concern of residents paying the utility fee before they can obtain services, we also recommend that the city be segmented into approximately 50 separate sections. As each section has the fiber network installed and residents' connections are available, then each residence in that section will be assessed the fiber network fee. Based on available information, one or more sections could be installed each month, with installation of the entire network taking about 3 years to reach the entire city. Further, we recommend that operating costs of the network only be assessed to residents that have connected to the network. This can be done as part of the ISP fees or shown as a separate component of fees. The lowest cost financing for the project would be to issue general obligation bonds. This bonding would require a vote of the residents to approve the bonds. The bonds would be paid through the monthly fiber utility fee, but would be backed by the taxing authority of Kaysville City. We recommend 30-year bonds given the current rate difference between shorter and longer-term bonds, and also to provide for an early payoff option. We would encourage the council to have the utility fee sunset after the bonds are paid off and an appropriate reserve is established, such that it doesn't become a forever fee or tax. If the city council doesn't want to force 100% of residents to be subject to the utility fee, they could create an opt-out process that would allow a limited number of residents to submit an application to be exempted from the utility. We modeled this limited opt-out at about 20% or 1,700 residences. If the opt-out process is implemented, a procedure for future re-entry to the utility would also need to be defined so that those residents pay their fair share of the infrastructure costs. If the utility model is not found to be acceptable, then we would recommend that the city pursue the subscriber model, where only those residents who desire to connect to the fiber network would be obligated to pay for the infrastructure installation. The subscriber model will cost participating residents more and carries more risk to the city, as it is highly dependent on the number of residents who sign up to connect to the network or the take rate. A minimum take rate for success in this model would be between 35% and 40% of residents signing up for connections. This model will require some funding backstop from the city on the bonding obtained to complete the project, similar to that which would be required by revenue bonds. The bonding may be accomplished through a third party like UIA, which would not then be shown in Kaysville financial statements. Take rate risk may be mitigated by asking interested residents to make a fully refundable deposit, say $200, to help the city know how many people would participate. It would also allow for prioritization of sections with the greatest interest. If enough interest is not generated, the city could refund the deposits and not implement the project. The deposit method could also be employed in the utility model to help prioritize sections for installation. No matter which model the city council determines to utilize for the fiber project, we encourage the city council to allocate resources for professional services to help the fiber project get started sooner rather than later. The professional services would include project management, legal, public relations, and financing. The amount needed is estimated to be $200,000 and could be repaid as part of the project financing. We do not recommend that the City Council defer action on this project and maintain the current status quo within Kaysville. As an FYI for the City Council, yesterday the Daily Herald reported that American Fork will be proposing to build a fiber optic network and operate it as a utility in an open infrastructure environment. Happy to take questions or answer anything City Council has.
Thank you, Andre. And I wanted to especially thank our technical advisory group, not only Andre, Brett Tarbox, Jordan Stevenson, and Ryan Judd, Michelle Barber, Stroh DeCare, Dean Story, and our city manager, Shane Scott. So thank you to all these people who have spent hours and hours digging into this. It's been how long?
Almost a year.
Almost a year. We have been working on this.
Andre
and
wishes he hadn't answered my phone call.
Yes, and so I want to open this up to questions, especially from the council members who were not on the committee, to get all their questions answered. So any questions from council? Councilmember Garn.
So I've tried to catch up a little bit on everything. I have some general opinions on this, which I won't share, but at this point, because we're just questions right now, right?
It's
But
a work item, so.
It's work.
Yeah.
It's a work session, so.
Free for all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Within limits tonight, okay?
Yeah, so try to summarize my points. First of all, I think this, whatever happens in the future, this is, I really firmly believe this absolutely necessary. I mean, certainly information communications today is just as important as transportation, or, you know, it's hard to make a biological comparison to, you know, water and that, but certainly roads, highways. And so that's essential. And the other thing is, whether we agree that it's essential or not, this is the direction that the whole world is headed. So you can stick your head in the sand and get eaten by the lion, or you can get with the program. And so there's a lot of benefits. The other thing that I think is really interesting about this, I can't think of, as you look at the utility model, other things that became essential at some point, like electricity, water, running water that the city provides, not even highways. All of those things were private at one point until the service just couldn't meet demand, couldn't be provided, capital expenses too high. For a variety of reasons, they became public utilities, and those services were then provided, in those cases, much more efficiently than the private sector. So there are exceptions to, usually the competition. This model is so amazing, I guess, to me, because I think there's other examples, if you thought about it, like maybe airplanes sharing an airport where there's several different airlines that all provide the service, and they compete on price and locations and routes and all of those things. But the airport is provided by an airport authority or a quasi-governmental entity. So this, in a way, is the best of both worlds, because, and not every city has done this, who's already adopted fiber, but we have the opportunity to sort of control our destiny here, to control costs and keep them lower than anything out there. And the way we do that is partially through private competition, just providing the pipes. And so it's hard to see a downside, except for this. I'm glad to see kind of maybe the opt-out capability that can work financially within the model. But generally speaking, this, so I sort of get the argument against the utility model, that I'm being forced to purchase something. And I guess that's one thing you have to look at, is everyone using it? And the answer is essentially yes. Even my 87-year-old father, my 91-year-old mother-in-law, all have the internet. And if you went to them and said, you're paying this much for dial-up, which is more than you could pay for a system that's instantaneous, who wouldn't take that opportunity? So it's definitely not a question, but I just think it's exciting what Kaysville, and we're not the tip of the spear. So other cities have tried this and maybe failed in the past, and we've had the opportunity to look at what really works best and then adopt that. So, but I completely agree that if we wait any longer, all the other cities surrounding us across the United States and even other nations and our surrounding cities all have some form of fiber available, and Kaysville does not. That just cannot stand. And so why not take advantage of the least risk, lowest cost opportunity? And one lot more thing I'll say too is it's not just the cost. The state, anytime that the state of Utah looks at some legislation or some rule, they not only have to look at the cost to the taxpayer, but the cost to the resident. So some new regulation may not have any taxpayer dollar cost, but it may be very expensive to the resident generally. So we have to look at the overall, economic impact of moving in a certain direction. And when you look at this from that perspective, there's number one, general obligation bond. I will say, to be fair, that there is some general fund risk there, right? Because if you were to default on the general fund, but there's a general obligation bond, unlike a dedicated revenue bond, you would have some tax obligation there. But there's so many mitigating factors there, or ability to, tie it to the revenue associated with the $17 fee to pay it back, that arguably there's very negligible, from practically speaking, very negligible risk that you would ever have to tap into general taxation. So that being said, it's not a tax. It's a user fee, which just happens to be much lower for a service that everyone in the community is using.
Thank you. Councilmember DeCare.
I just spent the last 2 days at our statewide technology conference, where all 41 school districts from across the state were represented. Libraries, governments, cities, municipalities, vendors. And I had an opportunity to talk to a lot of folks there about this project and how ambitious it was. And it was amazing to me how overwhelmingly positive from the hundreds and hundreds of people that were there of how positive this is, you know. Good on Kaysville. Good on you guys. Way to be forward-looking. You know, way to make this happen for your 32,000 residents. You know, working in technology for the past, you know, decade and a half, I see and I understand and I value the importance of something like this. Like Councilmember Garn said, the internet is something that all of us use, every single one of us. About 4% of households across the nation don't have an internet connection. 4%, that's it. 96% of households are connected in some shape, form, or fashion. I'm pleased to put this on the ballot. I'm pleased to move this forward. It's an ambitious project. It's taken a lot of time. It's taken a lot of effort. We've looked at things. We've spent a lot of time together. But I think we've done things right here and leave it in the hands of the voters and see where it goes. And I think that we're going to be overwhelmingly positive and go forward from there.
She can go first.
Okay, Councilmember Barber, and then Councilmember Page.
Thank you, Andre, for preparing this to put together. I wanted to say, when I look back, we can go back in time. When I started campaigning, like a lot of people are, exactly 2 years ago, this was like something I was really interested in, and engaged with the city on my first official time engaging with them. And then once I took office in January of 2018, this was the very first item we worked on, one of the very first items. And really, the action that we took was to install our city's fiber ring, and then with the help of Ryan and some really key individuals from the city, we separated the fiber to the home part of it and took a giant pause and just tried to see what's really the best here, what's the best way going forward. And that was really hard to do because I was really excited and I wanted to get this done. But a year and a half later, or however long, I think we're at such a superior recommendation that we never would have come to a year and a half ago, ever. And it took a lot of restraint, tons of time poured into this, tons of time. And I am so proud because I feel like instead of just saying, this is cool, I think it's something that's awesome, I want a gig at my house, just because I want to say it, now I can say we have data that shows the very best model that I, as a representative, can go and present to my city and say, I feel like I've done the best I can, I've come, I'm looking at you and saying, this is the best option I can find you. If you'd like it, fantastic. But I feel like we've really done our job.
Councilmember Page.
No, I just want to thank you as well and everybody that's been involved in this. You know, this is a complicated issue for a lot of people, and I think right now, especially in the city, there is a certain amount of people in this city that does not see the importance of that. I mean, there's some, and a lot of them feel that, hey, our police department, our fire department, everybody will suffer if we put this through, and it's kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul and type situation. I guess the question I would have is, for the committee is, do you have any recommendations on how we can overcome this, what would you call it, an image problem?
Perception?
Yeah, perception of the value of fiber and everything else.
Well, I think that's part of what the recommendation is, that we need to have some professional services to assist in making sure that people are educated. Because as I indicated previously, when I first started on the committee, I was very much biased against the city being involved to do it. And by becoming educated, I learned the value of what could be delivered to the residents through this kind of a project. So I think the same thing can happen with all the residents if they actually can read and understand the facts. They'll come to the same realization that this is to their benefit, and not just in the short term, but in the long term.
Yeah.
You know, just a comment. I have a daughter that lives in Spanish Fork, and they have fiber. I tell you, it is probably the greatest blessing that city has. It's incredible, and and they are booming, and a lot of it is because of having that there, and that's one of the biggest draws that they have to their city, not only for businesses but for individuals as well. And I support this as well. I really like the process we've gone through. And, every once in a while, you can't lead without looking behind, making sure people are following you. And I think that we're doing this right. It's just a matter of if the city's ready for it or not. I guess we'll find out.
If I can maybe compare, tonight we've had a lot of conversation about traffic and roads. And if you want to take an analogy here, it's like Kaysville having a 2-lane road that's working adequate right now, but saying we can give you a 72-lane road.
Right.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about that.
I do. Brett, do you want to say anything?
I think Andre has done much better than I can.
Okay. You've sat here all night long. I would love to. Now, I want 2 things I want to do. First of all, I want to acknowledge people in our community who have concerns about this. And I understand those concerns because I was in that same camp for most of my life. And the turning point for me to consider internet or broadband as a utility was being here in Kaysville, and we are unable to force the private market to give us what we are asking for. We are unable to convince them to sell us fiber. And if it were possible to do that, then I would not be going this direction. We have a duopoly here in Kaysville, and in order to increase free market options, I think this is the best thing that we can do, is have a neutral platform and allow more competition. It's going to bring down the price, increase the service, and give our people more choice in their lives. And but I do want to recognize those in our community who are very strongly opposed to the idea of government interfering in free market. And I accept that as a very valid reason to be against this. I do think that we will see. So that was thing number 1 I need to say. Thing number 2 is I want to be very clear with people. We are going to talk about this some more, but I want this to go to the ballot. I want our residents to be able to vote on this. This is such a big decision. It should not be us just voting on this. This needs to go to our people to be able to vet it, and they need to be able to vote on it. And if they should vote it down, I think then we pick up and look at a subscription-based model instead. Because if they said no, they said no. And we'll do a subscription-based model and go with that. So, but I think the thing that we need to do tonight is we do need to specifically forward something on to action agenda for July 2nd. We're going to have a special council meeting July 2nd. And it's because July 4th is a holiday, and there's a couple of things that are stacking up that we need to take care of, and this is one of those things. So we do need to forward this to City Council, specifically the professional services, professional services, which will be paid for with the bond, not taxpayers. And also, I'd like to probably put the majority of the discussion back on work to continue to work on that.
Yeah.
But that one piece, I think that we need to forward that as an action agenda item. Yes.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
At what point, or do we, I guess I should say, do we vote to put it on the ballot, and when would that
Yes, we will.
be?
So the council, after we discuss this further, I don't think we can have a really good discussion about it tonight. We're all pretty tired. But I do want to put this on the agenda for the 2nd, and I want to put this back on work so that we can
And then we can decide then.
So we can discuss it some more.
So,
Thank you.
so do we need Nick, do we need a formal or a formal motion then to move this to an action item?
Nothing.
Or just a recommendation?
Yeah, just recommendation and consensus is fine.
All right.
All right. All right. So,
That's, well, okay.
yeah, so.
I was just going to say, that's where I stand, so.
Chair
Councilmember.
speaking. So yeah, I have questions. So as far as the government intervention portion of it, I think that people have concerns there, not so much that the government is maybe helping facilitate it, as the government helps facilitate other things. So let's be clear and let's be respectful to people's opinions and people's ideologies that do matter. The fact that this is being forced upon in one model, okay, I get that there are multiple models, but one model that this council clearly wants badly is to force it upon the people. That's where the differential comes into play, in my opinion, of what the people are seeing and perceiving and feeling. That doesn't feel very good, okay? And the excitement that you guys have is great, but to sit here and say like it's the greatest blessing in Spanish Fort, that's questionable, you know? So excited to have a gig at your home. Are you running that much data back and forth? I mean, the argument that people have to have internet nowadays to survive, okay, there's maybe some sub-arguments to that, but how much internet and how fast do they have to have? And who are we really catering to? Now, questions. Mr. Lortz, in these models, I don't see anywhere what you're planning on charging, or Design 9 is planning on charging the businesses of this city. Please speak to that.
So business rates, they had put some proposals in their report.
Which are what?
I don't have them off the top of my head, but they are generally...
Take a hip shot. You've been on this for a year and a half. How much are you planning on charging businesses? $17 a month?
So, okay, you have to separate it. There's a difference between the utility fee and the operating fees, and then the ISP fees.
Great. So let me give you an example. In Longmont, it's $1,100 a month for a business and like $50, $60 for residents. Where do you foresee us going in totality of cost? A business who signs up, what are they going to pay?
Well,
Same as a resident?
Is the question, what are they going to pay for the infrastructure fee?
Altogether.
Or what are they going to pay
Altogether. So let's say a resident in your model is going to pay around $50, $60 a month.
Yes.
Give me an idea how much you intend a business to pay. The same or
No,
greater?
businesses will be more because their
Exponentially?
usage will be higher. So generally speaking, a business is going to be anywhere between 5 and 10 times the price of a residential pricing.
So it'll be $400, $500, $600 for a business.
It could be $250 to $500 very easily, depending on what their needs are. If they want to go to full gig speed up and down with having a high usage, they could be the $1,000 model. If they want a 10 gigabit speed, they could be higher than that.
Okay, so businesses, let's back that off now. As far as the in this model, speaking in the utility model, as far as the necessary monthly payment, will all businesses be required to pay that $17 fee also?
That is what is recommended, is that everybody has the same fee. There is not a significant portion of businesses within Kaysville to skew the model very far.
So whether businesses as well use it or not, or stick with their existing provider, they're still going to pay the $17 fee? Because I doubt they'll fit into your exempt model.
Unless they fall into the opt-out. If they want to opt out, and it's up to the city council how you define who can opt out and for what reasons, they could opt out.
Okay, so the way I've seen it put is it would be like elderly people who could opt out. Do you want to speak to that, Mayor? So are we visioning that potentially businesses could opt out as well?
We're looking at a
non-elderly or?
I think that that's up to the council to decide. So whatever we feel comfortable with.
So we don't know at this point. That's a good enough, that's a satisfactory answer. What about churches and schools? What do we intend on there?
Schools are already covered. I can speak to that, working for the Utah Education Network.
They're already on a fiber network?
Yes, Dave, they are. All of them are.
Yeah, so are some businesses. So is my house to a certain extent. So, yeah, it is. CenturyLink has fiber in Kaysville.
That's not what I'm laughing at. Okay, anyway, so Yeah.
Well, I believe I have the floor here, so what are we planning on?
You
So
asked me a question.
speak about schools then. Let's hear it. Tell us.
All schools are connected through the Utah Education Network, all 41 school districts across the board, top to bottom, left to right, Logan to Blanding, to St. George, to Vernal, to Grouse Creek, to anywhere in between. Done, end of story.
Okay.
Not affected by this at all, in any shape, form, or fashion.
Okay.
Nonprofits such as churches, I can't speak to that, I have no idea.
Are they going to be paying the $17 a month fee in the model?
I wouldn't think so.
I don't believe we included them in the model.
We did not.
I think you
include
charge
any-
them the road fee, and you're going to let them exempt
Irrelevant.
out of this?
It's irrelevant. Stick on topic.
It's not irrelevant. You guys have compared this to a highway 50 times. How is comparing this to the road fee any different than your highway comparisons?
You know, it's getting late.
Yeah.
I think our nerves are kind of frayed right now, so I
Mine
still.
or not, I'm happy to discuss.
I understand that, and I appreciate that. But I think what would be a better use of our time, I like these questions, I appreciate these, and I want us to be able to discuss them more fully, but I think we need to, I want to talk about it again on another work session.
Clever. Sounds good.
All right? Okay. So what I want to do tonight.
I do have one that's pertinent.
Okay.
Okay, that is not
Go ahead.
comparable. You spoke to the fact that the incumbent providers currently are unwilling to budge. Would you speak to the meetings that you've held with them? Is your tenure of mayor? How have those meetings gone, and when did they happen?
I was contacted by Comcast.
After this fiber thing came about?
No, it was while we were first starting to talk about it. And Ryan, did they not see our RFP? Yes. Yes, they did. So they chose not to participate. So we expected them to participate, and they chose not to.
So in the franchise agreement, I can't remember if it's CenturyLink or Comcast, there is currently in our franchise agreement agreements there that state that they have to carry through better service. You know, I'm beating it up a little bit, but they have to provide better service downstream to more neighbors and neighborhoods per our agreement. Have you sought to enforce that?
Nope, I have not.
Great, it's fine, it's nice to have a clear answer.
I'm sorry about that. All right, so we're going to get back to this, and so I would entertain, okay, so let's just generally share your comments on whether or not you support contracting professional services.
One comment before that.
Yes.
Is a announcement is there has been the Design 9 feasibility study that we have is available online. The results from the survey that was sent out to every resident's address in Kaysville is also online. A lot of statistics and the model that Andre is referencing are both online. The original one and the updated one, we left both for reference as we get closer. There probably will be more, KaysvilleCity.com/fiber. You can always email fiber@KaysvilleCity.com. You can contact any one of us. This is a plea to stay engaged, please. We have quite a while to work on this, and we're trying to make as much information available. If there's a site that we're not making available, I think it's perfectly acceptable to bring it up, and we'll address it. And my final thought that I wanted to clarify was, I think for me, the mindset of shifting from speed, I mean, that's what I was trying to allude to, has been what changed my perspective over this past year and a half. Because this really, it's not about speed. It's about open access. It's about allowing everyone to have the same competition that will try to give them the best product possible. And it's not about speed.
Thank you. All right.
With no efforts to enforce our franchise agreements that are currently in place.
I can talk to you about that after.
All right. Okay, so Councilmember DeCare, do you support the professional services?
Yes.
Councilmember Barber, do you support professional services?
We'll talk about it more.
Right.
This will get fleshed out more as it comes on.
Right. So it will be on the action agenda item on the second.
I just feel like that would be a better time to get into the.
Yeah.
What's the cost of it?
It's right on your paper.
I know. Tell me again, what is it?
It is, I will just read it right now. The Professional services would include project management, legal, public relations, and financing. The amount needed is estimated to be $200,000 and could be repaid as part of the project financing.
Which I think it should be,
Absolutely.
as part of the bond.
If the project goes through, and that's on
If
top
it
of the
does.
$60K that's been spent, so $250,000 after, if that service was to be
Yeah.
executed.
All right. Councilmember Garn,
Yes, full speed ahead.
Councilmember, and Councilmember Adams, your
No.
thoughts?
No, thanks, no.
All right. Do you have direction, staff? I'm talking to you. Do you have direction that we want this on the agenda for in a second? Got it. All right. Since time is late, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the city council meeting, and then we are going to move into redevelopment agent.
There just was one person that signed up, I
Yeah,
believe,
for
for
call to
public
public.
comment.
Oh,
Yeah,
forgive me.
public, yeah, please.
Yes, we do need to do public comment.
Yes.
Eric Isom, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor Witt, City Council members, my name is Eric Isom. I'm a Kaysville resident, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you. And first want to thank you for your due diligence in executing a fiber survey, creating a technical advisory group, and hosting an open house to gather input and contemplate the benefits and costs of Kaysville investing in a fiber optic network. Since 2004, I work in the communications industry for Quest and CenturyLink, and since 2015, I work for CenturyLink in a contract role. My professional and personal experience with municipal entry has not been a very positive one. Typically, costs are underestimated, subscribers are overestimated, and service issues continue to arise. Internet is definitely a critical service. However, I support the philosophical view that if it is in the yellow pages, government should not provide it. I apologize for missing the June 12th open house, but was appreciative for Mayor Witt allowing me the opportunity to contact her and to talk with her in detail about the proposal. Thanks very much, Mayor. I am grateful 20% of low income, fixed income, or households without internet may be given the opportunity to opt out of the proposed utility fee. However, I do not support the utility fee proposal that would take away my choice to opt in or opt out, but instead require my family to pay a $17 a month amount to retire an estimated $28 million bond, whether I use the service or not. Technology is ever changing, and the electronics on the end of the fiber will eventually need to be changed. Provo did not fully contemplate the expense of maintaining their iProvo fiber optic network and ultimately sold their asset to Google for $1. Provo residents and businesses were assessed a utility fee to pay off the bond obligation. I understand Kaysville is only planning to install the fiber infrastructure and then allow private providers to offer services over the open infrastructure. I recognize a fiber optic network can bring benefits to the city through smart meters, etc., and to residents wanting faster speeds or additional provider options. I am satisfied with our current internet provider, our internet speed, and the monthly service charge. However, a city-owned network likely will not attract large providers who do not want to abandon their own network investments or rely on someone else to maintain the quality of the network. If the Kaysville City Council truly desires to move forward with a fiber optic network, I would support residents being given the opportunity to vote on the proposal, letting Kaysville City know conclusively if residents are willing to pay a monthly utility fee, potentially for the next 30 years, or if they are satisfied with their current internet service. Thanks again.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Eric.
All right. All right. So now I would entertain a motion to adjourn this
I
meeting.
got a quick comment,
Move to
though. With the amount of money, I mean, it's been argued that lobbyists will come out of the woodwork, right? If this project went through, right? CenturyLink and Comcast, and they will come out, if this goes to a ballot, and they will put hundreds of thousands of dollars into it. This is great, you guys. It's very, very respectful. Yeah, both of you.
What is?
All right.
It goes without saying, but, so look at the amount of money we're putting into this to lobby to ensure that what you guys want happens. You're putting the same amount of money into this that you're saying Comcast and CenturyLink will put into it, but you're using money that's not yours.
Thank you.
Don't lecture me.
All right.
Really?
Let's have a motion to adjourn.
Then stop
Make a
your.
motion
All
that
right.
we adjourn.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Don't want to talk?
All right.
Fine, I'll talk with you.
I'm not talking with you.
Okay. And now,
You guys
We
stop.
can do better than this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
all right, guys, we have a couple of more things that we need to do.
All right.
I would call our redevelopment agency board meeting to order. Okay, and Dean, can you walk us through what we're doing?
As a redevelopment agency, you have two action items tonight. Amend the current fiscal year 19 redevelopment budget and adopt the fiscal year 20 budget. The resolutions have been presented to you.
All right, thank you. And we had a public hearing on this last 2 weeks ago. All right. Any questions or comments on these?
Yeah, Dean, could you help us understand, could you give us a breakdown of the $56,000 of expenses for property sale, fees, and plat change? Is that the sale of the property over there on 300 West?
Correct. As we
So
discussed today.
56 grand for, it was $200,000 property. That's, I mean, real estate 6%. There's 12 grand for the fee. So.
Yeah, as we discussed at our work session, or not a work session, but the hearing, the original property was purchased for about $200,000 or so. But the intent of buying that property was to acquire right-of-way.
Mhm.
And so as we sold the property, we cut off a piece for the right-of-way. So that is the value of the right-of-way that we kept, that we retained. And so we have to show that as an expense to the project. Now, that's not all right away. About 8,000 of that were closing fees and costs.
Aside from the real estate fees, so, so about $36,000 that's a fee to that right-of-way that we kept.
Correct, 36 for the right-of-way.
We're expensing that to ourselves.
Yes.
Thanks, Dean.
Okay, all right. We need to move these items.
I'm sorry, I do have one more. Since you broke it out, what are the professional services of 25 grand?
That's a budget item. So if there are any professional and technical services that are required of the redevelopment agency, we charge that to that account. I think we budgeted 25,000, but I suspect we haven't spent more than 1,500 this year.
But we charge 25 grand to the account?
Now, that's the budget amount. But
Okay.
the actual is probably quite a bit
Much
less.
less.
Than that. Yeah.
Okay.
Are we finished?
I'll entertain one more. This one is maybe more so for you. In the 2020 RDA, it talks about the facade grant. Can you give us an update of how that's coming along?
Yes, I'd love to. All right, so we received, I think it was 12. Is that about right?
That's about right. I forget
Okay,
the exact number,
so-
10 or 12 applications.
Yeah, so we received, would you like to make a motion?
I sure would. Motion to adjourn.
we have to-
Actually,
We have to approve these.
After we approve those items.
Hey, back up.
Yes, okay, fine. Motion to approve redevelopment agency items number 1 and 2.
Second.
all right.
Any
Let's
comments?
start with Councilmember Adams.
You have a comment,
No.
Councilmember Barber?
I was just saying, this would be the time for comments, but no, I do not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Aye.
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 All right, both
Motion to adjourn.
are passed unanimously, 5-0. We have one more, I would motion to adjourn as the redevelopment agency. We did. I would like to call us to order as the municipal building authority.
Right.
All right, and we need, Dean, tell us one more time what we're doing here?
The action item tonight is to adopt the building authority budget for fiscal year 2020.
Okay. Okay, questions? Okay, I would entertain a motion to move the building authority budget for 2020.
I'll make a motion that we move the building authority budget for 2020.
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Barber and seconded by Board Member DeCare. Any comments? All right, we'll go to a vote. Board Member Page.
Aye.
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 Nay.
All right, motion passes 4-1. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All
The nay
right.
vote is because it involves the city hall, which I have a differing opinion on.
Okay, thank you.